Okay, colleagues, thank you very much for settling down. So, as we described yesterday, we have, we're not yet opening the meeting, that's the formal thing, but we have the Secretary of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, Excellency Raphael Lotilla, is joining us just to give us a few opening remarks and welcome us to Manila again, and then we'll proceed to go into a family photograph, and then we'll come back, open the agenda formally. So this is not the opening, this is an opening address, a welcoming address, etc., procedurally. So let me welcome you all here to this foretaste of the meeting, and let me invite Excellency, the Secretary of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, Excellency Raphael Lotilla, to give us some opening remarks so we can start our works. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Distinguished co-chairs and members of the board, the alternate members and advisors, the executive director and the secretariat, observers, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the President of the Republic of the Philippines, Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr., I warmly welcome you all once again to the Philippines for the 7th meeting of the Board of the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage. As always, we are pleased to host you, and we thank you for the dedication and commitment that you continue to bring to this important work. The Philippines stands in solidarity with all climate-vulnerable nations whose survival and resilience depend on the effectiveness of this fund. As we begin our work, allow me to underscore one central point: the ability of the fund to deliver depends on its capitalization. While pledges to date have been encouraging, the current levels of capitalization is insufficient to match the scale of needs we know are coming. Global estimates point to around $200 to $400 billion annually in loss and damage by 2030. Yet today, the fund holds only a fraction of this requirement. Last month, at the 80th session of the UN General Assembly, the Philippines co-organized with the FRLD a high-level side event to galvanize financial and political momentum while strengthening multilateral cooperation and responding to loss and damage. We reiterated the call: substantial, predictable, and sustainable capitalization is indispensable if this fund is to meet its objectives. I encourage the board to reflect on how we can collectively broaden and strengthen the fund's financial base. Our discussion should aim at ensuring that resources are commensurate with the scale of needs, predictable in availability, and responsive to the urgency of loss and damage. Equally important is the question of access and operational clarity. The operationalization of the Barbados implementation modalities is a priority. These modalities should ensure that support is accessible, timely, and country-driven, while also being simple and responsive to the unique circumstances of those most affected. The credibility of the fund will rest on how quickly and effectively it can move resources where they are most urgently needed. Looking further ahead, the development of a long-term resource mobilization strategy will be indispensable in setting clear but realistic goals, diversifying sources of finance, and providing the stability and predictability needed for the fund to operate at scale in the years to come. Finally, our work must be coherent within the wider loss and damage architecture. The fund cannot operate in isolation, but in coordination with other institutions that provide technical and financial support. Aligning and reinforcing each other's work can deliver a comprehensive and effective response to the urgent challenges faced by developing countries. The world looks to this fund with great expectation. The deliberations we undertake can help chart a course that builds confidence in the fund and strengthens its ability to meet the needs of the most vulnerable. Let us work together to ensure that this meeting brings us closer to a fund that is adequately resourced, fully operational, and effective where it matters most. On behalf of the government and people of the Philippines, we remain laser-focused on hosting the board and working with you all towards achieving those ends. I thank you for your commitment and wish you productive discussions ahead. Maraming salamat po. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Excellency and Mr. Undersecretary. Again, let me, on behalf of the board, thank you for the dinner last night at the Manila Hotel and for all the hospitality that we receive when we come to the Philippines, from the support at the political level, from your president, yourselves, and other colleagues, as well as the support staff that move us around and the support staff that make these meetings possible, and people that feed us and look after us. So thank you very much to the government of the Philippines, and as I expressed yesterday evening, thank you very much to the colleagues in New York at the mission to the UN for helping to organize that meeting. It was a resounding success, and it was extremely important to have the loss and damage agenda located within the confines of the UN General Assembly. So thank you very much, and thank you for those remarks. They resonate with both co-chairs, as well as I think we speak on behalf of the board. You've given us very clear direction on your expectations of what we should deliver for this fund at this meeting and for the fund going forward. So again, I want to thank you very much. I do feel very much that while I'm a South African citizen by birth and my passport is South African, but I live in America, but I'm also Filipino, so thank you very much. So with that, colleagues, we're just going to, I think, go outside and have a family photograph, and then we'll release the Undersecretary to get back to important duties. But again, let me thank you very much for the hospitality that we get, but also the political support that the government of the Philippines gives to this board and to this fund. It is very much appreciated. So thank you very much. Colleagues, another round of applause for this. We're just outside, I think, or we're taking outside, I think. Colleagues, so please, outside. Let's Okay, can the secretary just confirm a quorum, please? And can board members take their seats so the secretary can count the numbers?
Oh, I lost my glasses. Here.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. It's my honor to open the meeting of the board for its seventh session. Let me again welcome you all to Manila. We have a very important task ahead of you ourselves as we prepare for this not final stage, but pretty much final phase to operationalize the decisions that we've made in our governing instrument, but also the decisions we took in Barbados to have an early start to the work of the fund. Let me also express our condolences and sympathies to the government and people of the Philippines for the lives that have been lost and the destruction that has been brought upon people in relation to the earthquake and the typhoons that have hit various regions in the Philippines, and in particular Cebu, which was the host of our last meeting. So we're all pretty familiar with Cebu, and so we express our heartfelt condolences. And we salute the resilience of the people of the Philippines in this trying time that brings the issue of responding to loss and damage much closer to our hearts, and therefore puts a high emphasis on the urgency and the speed of our work, but also the ability and robustness of the systems that we put in place to ensure that this fund actually does operate at speed and can deliver to people most impacted by the adverse effects of climate change, wherever they may be in the developing world. So again, thank you very much for attending the meetings so far, the constituency meetings and the informal yesterday. Again, so just to welcome you here, let me hand over to Jean-Christophe to make some remarks as well.
Thank you, Richard, and good morning, everyone. So glad to see you again in Manila. Let me first join Richard and express my sympathy to the people of Philippines for the, I think, 3 typhoons, the earthquakes, which hit Philippines over the last weeks. And as I said yesterday, a special thought to people of Cebu, where we spent the 10 days last July for the board meeting. Obviously, we relate more particularly to these people, but more generally to the most vulnerable, which are dramatically hit by the consequences of climate change and also by other catastrophes, obviously. I want also to join Richard to thank the government of Philippines not only for hosting this beautiful, wonderful dinner yesterday in this beautiful building, but also for their continued support. As you have seen, Secretary Lotilla was again with us this morning to open this 7th board meeting, which demonstrates very clearly their commitment behind the board. The event at Yunga was also a demonstration of their engagement with us. So really, I think we have to salute the government of Philippines for staying behind us and allowing us to move forward in such a good way. Now we have 3 days, and colleagues, we have no choice but to move forward. We have been working very hard with the Secretariat, the World Bank team, obviously with our teams, to be able to propose to the board some decisions very important decision to move forward. Obviously, documentation has not been ready on time. That was not unexpected. I warned everyone that timing between B6 and B7 was very short. So we have done our best to provide the board with proper documentation, but that's true. Most of it arrived very, very late, and some of it is not yet ready. So we have to act in this kind of context, but at the same time, we have no choice to move forward. I am pretty confident that we have made such preparation that will allow the board to agree on the issues we have to agree upon along these next 3 days. I am again very optimistic. There is still some work to be done that will be up to all of us to manage to get to common views. But again, we are very, 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 very close, and I will be quite disappointed that we don't manage to get it. So, colleagues, let's work, let's engage, and let's the job be done by the end of this board meeting. So, let's start right now. Back to you, Richard.
Okay, thank you, Jean-Christophe. So let me continue my opening remarks, which is just very procedural, and I apologize up front if I'm butchering anybody's names, but this is the worst part of the job of co-chairs. This is why Jean-Christophe gives it to me, so I look like the bad guy. So I apologize if I get your names totally wrong. I will learn about them. So we need to inform the board that there have been some changes to the board membership in general, and then there have been changes for this meeting to accommodate colleagues. So let me welcome the following new members. Natasha Bianca from Germany has replaced Sebastian Lesch as the board member representing developed countries. Tessa Vataru from Cook Islands has replaced Daniel Lund from Fiji as a board member representing small island developing states. Lauren Dodds from Canada has replaced Laurence Ahusu from Canada as board member representing developed countries. Sarah Short from New Zealand has replaced Ben Abraham from New Zealand as an alternate board member representing developed countries. Ali Thakur Sheikh from Pakistan has replaced Mark Dennis Jovan from the Philippines as board member representing Asia Pacific states. Mark Dennis Jovan from the Philippines has replaced Ali Thakur Sheikh from Pakistan as the alternate member representing Asia Pacific. Uti Mayat Hirvonen from Finland has replaced Johanna. I'm not even going to try and pronounce Johanna's surname, from Finland as alternate board member representing developed countries. Martin Granda from Argentina has replaced Victoria Gandhi from Argentina as alternate board member representing Latin America and Caribbean. On behalf of the co-chairs and the secretariat and the board, we'd like to thank Victoria, Johanna, Ben, Laurence, and Sebastian for their contributions to the fund over the first 6 board meetings, and we wish them well in their endeavors and their future careers. Their participation and input to this fund will be a living legacy when we get to implement the BIM, which they played a central role. So for those of you who are part of those delegations, please can you express our heartfelt thanks and gratitude to those colleagues that have contributed so much to our work. So thank you. In light of that, it's now my duty to continue to butcher names and inform you about the temporary changes to board membership for this meeting. So Jean-Frédéric Baudet Ferreira Franca from Brazil has replaced Ambassador Lilian Beatriz Chagas de Moura from Brazil for B7 as board member representing Latin American and Caribbean states. Tibian Ibrahim from Maldives has replaced Ahmed Wahid from Maldives for B7 as alternate member of the board representing small island developing states. My friend Ahmed Abdul Rahman Al Gahada from the UAE has replaced Minister Abdullah Balala from the UAE for Board 7 as a board member representing Asia Pacific states. Anders Martin Lannemark from Norway has replaced Caroline Kelton from Norway for B7 as an alternate member representing developed countries. And Daniel Lund from Fiji has replaced Tessa Bataru from Cook Islands for B7 as board member for small island developing states. So welcome to those colleagues who are taking seats up for this board meeting, and again express our thanks for the input, although they're coming back to us for colleagues that are not present at this board meeting. And let me also add that our colleague Sumaya Ahmed Sakuldin Hamad from Sudan is not with us, and she is being replaced by, well, not replaced, but the seat will be taken up by Tosi Mpanu, who's an alternate board member for the African group anyway, so welcome, Tosi. We also like to acknowledge those colleagues that are not able to be with us: Ambassador Lilian from Brazil, Ana Rodriguez from Portugal, Lauren Dodds from Canada, Peter George Abraham from Antigua Barbuda, Zachary Phillips from Antigua Barbuda, Anthony Ferguson, Bahamas, Ghulam Hussein Dazi from Iran, Jaime Trambon from Chile, Sumaya, as I've already said, and Toyoshi Hayoki from Japan. So we look forward to the colleagues' return to the board, and we welcome the replacement members for this session. We'd also like to welcome our active observers, and so we have listened to you and have made sure that we've provided seating arrangements and mic arrangements for you. I hope the Secretariat that this continues to be the policy. We did have a back and forward with the observer colleagues. I did have the opportunity to meet with two of them in New York alongside the UNGA meetings. As you know, we have interim arrangements for the participation of active observers in the board while we're developing the policy suite. So we'd like to welcome all our active observer colleagues to the board. We will have a session today, which is the regular dialogue with active observers. So welcome, colleagues. So with that ends my introductory remarks. Let me go to the next agenda item so we can start our work. So I move now to agenda item 2, which is organizational matters. And the board has before it document FRLD/B.7/1/Rev.1, which is the provisional agenda for the meeting. Can I take it the board is ready to adopt the agenda? Seeing no objections, the agenda is so adopted. Thank you. We also now like to turn to sub-agenda item 2B on organizational matters. So we've circulated and we will recirculate a schedule of meetings for today. The aim for today is to go through agenda items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then pause, and then go into 7, 8, and 10B. And as we discussed yesterday, 7, 8, and 10B are simply, we've had a discussion in the informal meeting yesterday, so we've heard your views. We're simply going to open those agenda items and explain to you the task for the small groups, so that shouldn't take much longer. The aim of the session is to get through the work as soon as possible, have the dialogue with civil society, and then suspend the session so you can go into working groups this afternoon. We'll confirm who the co-facilitators are of each group. We will appoint one developing country facilitator. We'll give you tasks, and there'll be rooms available. Secretariat will be with you to support documentation. And we expect colleagues to come back to us every single morning on updates with progress, but we do need those small groups to finish their work on Wednesday. No later than Wednesday. Yeah, so that we can adopt the outcomes. We do understand also that there are some time constraints for colleagues to make sure that we finish our work quite early on Thursday, because there are some members that will then leave Manila on their way to Brasilia for the pre-COP meeting. So Diong, I know you in particular are going. I think Ricardo, you're also going. I'm not quite sure, Ambassador, if you're going as well, whoever else. And so we will endeavor to make sure that work is finished. Okay, so we will have a bilateral meeting with the co-facilitators of the groups tomorrow morning just to assess progress, and then we'll make sure that at least tomorrow's agenda gives time for our discussion on the Secretariat organizational structure and the Secretariat work plan. We're not able to answer any questions. That's the Secretariat's reports, and so we'll make sure there's time for that. And then we're really putting the expectation on the small groups to deliver the outstanding issues that were raised yesterday on those 3 matters, which would then allow us to launch the call for proposals at COP30 and demonstrate our ability as a fund to start supporting loss and damage in developing countries. Can I hand over to you, Jean-Christophe, or do you want to go?
You can do 3.
Okay, so I'm going to go then to agenda item 3, which is the report of the 6th meeting of the board. The board has before it document FRLD/B.6/7, which is a report of the 5th meeting of the board for the Fund of Responding to Loss and Damage. The report was circulated to the board on the 13th of September 2025, and no comments have been received to date. So can I take it that the board is ready to adopt the report of B5? Seeing no comments or objection? B6, sorry. B6, can I have your glasses, please? So the report for B6 is adopted. I would say that we also had a conversation with the Secretariat based on experiences from the past couple of meetings, and we have asked the Secretariat to make sure that the compendium of decisions is available to the board within 2 days of the end of the meeting. So we're going to try and make sure that this happens rather than the practice where we've sent it out a little bit later. So please bear with us that we're learning and we're adapting, and we're trying to make sure we're better along every single way of the journey. So thank you. Let me hand over to Jean-Christophe for agenda item 4.
Thank you, Richard. I would now like to invite the board to turn to agenda item 4, decisions proposed between the 6th and the 7th meeting of the board. The board has before it document FRLD/B7/2, board decisions proposed between the 6th and 7th meeting of the board. One decision without a board meeting was proposed and approved between B6 and B7. As you know, we have proposed to the board to change the dates of this board meeting. So the dates for the 7th meeting of the board was approved on August 25 as decision BBM 2025/01. Decisions approved without a meeting are recorded in the report of the following meeting in accordance with paragraph 52 of the Rules of Procedure. Shall I now take that the board is ready to take note of document FRLD/B7/2? Seeing no objection, the document is so noted. With this, I now close this agenda item, and we'll now turn to the agenda item 5, a report of the Secretariat. And we will address as well the sub-item of this item, which are A, report on the activities of the Secretariat, B, report on the execution of the administrative budget, and C, report by the interim trustee on the status of the trust fund resources. For that, the board has before it documents FRLD/B7/3, report of the activities of the Secretariat, which also contains in its Annex 1 the report on the execution of the administrative budget, and the document FRLD/B7/4 report by the interim trustee on the status of FRLD Trust Fund resources. I would like now to invite the Executive Director to present an update on the activities of the Secretariat, including progress on the implementation of the Secretariat's mandates, the execution of the administrative budget, and the status of FRLD Trust Fund resources. I am happy to see, Ibrahima, that you are back on your feet, or almost. So thank you for joining us this morning. And I will now give you the floor for the presentation.
Well, thank you very much, co-chairs. A very warm welcome to board members, board members, advisors, to the new board members to B7 in Manila. Let me use this opportunity to express our gratitude and appreciation to the government of the Philippines for the usual welcome to this beautiful country, but also to the entire Department of Environment and Natural Resources for their dedication and commitment in making sure we have a smooth board meeting. I wanted to use this opportunity to also express our solidarity to the government of the Philippines, to the people of the Philippines for the earthquake, but also the typhoon that took place in this country. If there's any reminder that climate-induced loss and damage is important, event like this, it certainly reminds us the sense of urgency and the need for us to act and act swiftly. I wanted to also underscore what other coaches have said. Our organization and the fund is really at the juncture where the expectations are quite high, so delivering on the BIM and beyond is what most countries expect from us, and I have no doubt was the drive that I see in the meetings, in the corridors, will certainly deliver at COP30. So what I wanted to do is just give you briefly what happened in the work of the Secretariat from the last time we met up to today, and focusing on the transition from the interim secretariat to our office in Washington, and some of the strategic partnership we managed to forge in light of the board urging us to foster complementarity and concurrence with other entities, the efforts we've done on resource mobilization under the guidance of the board, and the communication and outreach and advocacy we've undertaken to further explain the work of the fund, but more importantly also to forge partnership and so on. And then last but not least, what we've done in the BIM and the observed matters and some of the emerging lessons that actually emerged since last time we met. I think the first thing I wanted to highlight, we did promise to the board after B7, the transition from the interim secretariat to the independent secretary will be fully completed. I am pleased to report to the board we've taken the necessary step for that to be finalized. And this is going to be the last involvement of interim secretariat to the board preparation, but also to the board itself. It would be amiss for me not to use this opportunity to express our gratitude and appreciation to the interim secretariat for the remarkable work they've done in paving the way for us to get to where we are today. So from UNFCCC, GCF, and the UNDP, you've done a remarkable job, and I want to use the opportunity to humbly appreciate your contribution. What we've done also under the guidance of the Budget Committee and the support is to make sure that the structure we are proposing to you is such that we can actually take over the responsibility the interim secretariat has been doing for the past couple of years. So as you will see when we present our organizational structure, you will see the measures that we've taken to make sure we've taken that responsibility fully. I think third, equally important, and that is the execution of our budget has increased For obvious reason, we are growing, our responsibility is also growing, and we get more people on board, but also more activities from the task that the board is giving us. And that is something that we actually monitor to make sure the resources you've given us are also executed properly to at least meet the expectation of the board. Second, equally important, and that is the strategic partnership that we are forging with other players in the global landscape of climate. Simply because the board has been very clear, we don't want to do this alone, we want to do with other players as well. So from Santiago Network, and we lost our presentation, but I will come back at some point. All right, there you go, magic. So we've been obviously reaching out to various partners, from the World Bank to other government MDBs and Santiago Network and the like, in making sure what is clearly stated in the governing instrument in terms of complementarity and coherence is actually exhausted by, implemented, by the Secretariat. Now, I'm pleased to see that also even our co-chairs are also reaching out to the co-chairs of Santiago Network and the WIM, again, so that the collaboration is not just at the Secretariat's level, but also at the board level as well. And we are also working in, or worked, in these modalities of what that partnership will look like. And obviously, we stand guided to be by the board to make sure we get it right. But it is important, and generally speaking, that these institutions are part of the discourse of the work of the Secretariat. You may have noticed when we had a high-level dialogue, the one in Washington, most of these institutions came to the meeting and were able to at least express what they bring to the table in addition to what the fund does. On resource mobilization, we did get some guidance from the framing paper that we presented to the board at B6 and got some feedback. I managed to put something together internally despite the limited resources, but we're able to at least hopefully looking at the further guidance from the board. So this very important milestone is actually completed as quickly as possible, given the importance of keeping up with the needs and the demand with regard to resources. And in the meantime, we've been working with the Trust Fund Department and making sure we actually provide updates to those who are pledged to the fund to make sure the conversion of the funding pledge into actual cash, which allows us to basically honor the commitment that the board will be making going forward. We have also, on the communication front, have done some work, at least to make sure that the fundamentals of our platform are in place for our communication. And starting with our website, I've been told by the team that we managed to provide some translation into French and Spanish with the opportunity to at least increase more languages so that at least people who need to understand the work of the Secretariat will not be prevented just because of a language issue, and that's something we intend to continue as well. We are quite present, obviously, in the digital front, in our LinkedIn page, as you may have seen, and as an opportunity just to continue to advocate, but also present what the fund is all about, with the intention of reaching as many stakeholders as possible. With regard to our regional engagement, we've been quite strategic about this. Obviously, we don't have an endless travel budget that allows us to go everywhere. So therefore, what we've been doing to just leverage some of this strategic gathering, they will not only to meet people bilaterally, but also to be able to at least participate in this regional event. And that's the reason why I was pleased to be able to attend the African Climate Summit in Addis Ababa, whereby at least about 5 heads of states talked about the importance of the fund. Most of the people who took the floor talked about the sense of urgency, and that is obviously a reminder that we will get over and over again as we proceed. We've done a similar exercise in the Pacific event in Samoa, with some of our staff able to be present and talk about what the fund does. And obviously we're looking at other opportunity in other parts of the world, in the developing world, to be able to at least reach out in some of this regional event. It is cost effective because it allows us not to travel to all the countries, but at the same time allows us to have all the players in one room so we can at least make the case. On the high level, we also beginning to identify and high-level supporters ahead of COP30. I wouldn't call them champion at this stage. I was quite pleased after my meeting with the president of Senegal, my home country. He was able, in his speech at the General Assembly, to make the case why this fund is important, is urgent, and we hope that other heads of states will make a similar plea, particularly at the Leaders Summit in UNGA in New York. I believe 15 out of the 70 that spoke talked about the fund or talked about loss and damage. So that kind of advocacy is very important in keeping the momentum and underscoring the importance of this fund, and this is something we'll pursue as well. On the BIM authorization, obviously we've been active in developing some of the papers, which we hope will contribute to the discussion at the board, and have been obviously quite active in the consultation, making sure that the feedback that we get from the board are taken into account in revising the papers. It is an understatement to say that the expectation, obviously, is that the call for funding requests be made at COP30 for the obvious reason, COP30 being the COP of implementation. So the expectation is that we have to bring in our contribution in that implementation at COP30. So we're looking forward to, obviously, the outcome of B7, and the Secretariat, which I have the pleasure of leading, is fully committed in making sure we support you in implementing whatever decision we made from here. On the observed matters, we obviously made some progress, starting with by making sure that the concern that the observers raised at the last board meeting, in showing respect to them in the board meeting, under the guidance of the co-chair, we managed to make sure at least they are seated properly, but also have a microphone whereby the dialogue with them will be done in a very respectful way, and I'm pleased we're able to do that. We've also experimenting with our consultation with the observers by having a monthly meeting with the observers led by the Deputy AD, and I will obviously attend every now and then. And the purpose of those consultations, beyond just the BIM and other decisions of the board, is to make sure whatever it's in the mind of the observers that can be discussed with them openly. And we had a meeting yesterday with them, and the suggestion was that to come up with an action plan from our meetings to make sure from meeting to meeting we'll be making progress, but my office remains available and accessible to all to make sure that we will improve our collaboration with them, starting with responding to the letters that they sent to us, which we hope hopefully after this meeting that letter will go to Tasmin, was wrote to us so that we can get into the next step of our consultation. We are also obviously working on the recommendation of the co-convening, the consultation of observer policies, equally important in terms of policies, but we seem to have a plan ahead which will get us to those policies, and then obviously progress on the blanket accreditation of the observers at B8 to be discussed then, and the resource to engage with the observers taken into account in that draft budget for 2026. We will be proposing in our staffing to have an observer lead within the Secretariat whose job as a focal point in making sure the relationship with the observers is strengthened and taken into account in the feedback they will be providing to us as well. Now, just to wrap up, a couple of emerging lessons, obviously, from the last time we met to today. One, obviously, is the need to actually balance, our capacity. We were setting up the Secretariat with the perspective of coming up with longer policies, longer-term policies, I should say, and building a system in place. But in the meantime, the board has decided, and which is fine with us, at B5 to launch into the BIM. It's important that we actually keep up with the decision of the board and making sure that our organizational structure is for the needs of today, but also for the need for the future. And that is something certainly which is going to be an evolving process to make sure that we have the capacity to keep up. So far, that capacity gap has been met by leveraging experts that we brought in as needed, and that's the reason we're able to actually produce all the papers to the board, for the board to actually make a decision. I think second lesson is now that the board has decided to go ahead with the focal point in each of the countries, we're beginning to actually have interlocutors in each of the countries with whom we can actually talk about the next step when the board actually launched the call for funding requests. It is extremely important, as I say, if we want to avoid actually being on the road most of the time, to leverage some of these regional gathering as a way of engaging both bilaterally but also regionally as well. And we certainly need to also be more proactive in engagement with observers and not just wait till there is a board document consultation, but we agree that within 2 board meetings, we can certainly consult on whatever topics of interest to the observers as well. Our coordination with the other MDBs and the funding arrangement is also continuing. It's an evolving process. I had a very productive conversation with the heads of the other climate fund. We'll be attending COP30, and we agree not only to have a joint event, but we also agree on the future high-level dialogue we'll be proposing to you. It's not just a reflection of what the fund wants to do, but also the reflection of the needs of the other funding arrangements, as you will see in our proposal in the concept note. And then with other MDB, MCF, extremely important because the board has decided, and the BIM, that the implementation of the decision of the board will be done mostly through partnerships. So that relationship is important, and that's the reason why we're reaching to other MDBs to make sure we forge the right partnership in supporting the work under the BIM, but also beyond. I think last but not least, it is something that we found out that every high-level event is an opportunity to keep the momentum in terms of the advocacy of the fund. It's an opportunity to forge partnership. It's an opportunity to at least explain and provide some updates on where we are on the fund. And this is something we'll continue to do as well in our line of work. One, notably, is the high-level event, that took place on the margins of UNGA in New York, where we're able to at least have the blessing of the co-chairs who actually open and chair the session. And I had the humble opportunity to lead the conversation at the high-level event in New York. And I think a lot of people kind of came back to us and say that the fund is actually positioning itself as the thought leader in loss and damage, even though we have to deliver on the BIM. But I think from thought leadership and the knowledge management, I believe that the fund is beginning to position itself in the global landscape as an institution that can actually foster the right conversation when it comes to loss and damage until we get to the billions that we'll be mobilizing. I wanted to also end by saying that with regard to the status of the resources and the execution of the budget, it is something that we have provided for information in the report that you have for the RAS. If necessary, obviously, the trustee and the secretariat remains available to provide any answers you have, and the people who can provide it are next to me. So on that note, I just wanted to again underscore the commitment of the secretariat, the energy that I see within the team, opportunity to grow the team, to keep up with the decision of the board. And I want to again underscore and thank from the bottom of my heart the interim secretary for the wonderful work they've done that paved the way to get us to where we are. Thank you very much, co-chairs.
So you are not doing any presentation of the executive of the execution of the budget?
No.
Only questions?
Why, any questions?
Thank you, Ibrahima. The board is now invited to take note of the information provided by the Secretariat, including the report on the execution of the 2025 administrative budget and status of resources. But before, I would like to open the floor for comments and questions about the presentation and also about the two other documents I just mentioned. Mo, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, JC, and thank you so much, Ibrahima, for the presentation and for the document. I think it is a very good document. So between you and the Secretariat and the Budget Committee is thanks and appreciation for this document. I have 3 points. One is an acknowledgement and appreciation for two specific countries. One is the Philippines for the partnership in what they did for the event in the General Assembly at the UNGA. I think this was a very important component in the visibility of the fund and also in bringing the discussion there. And the second, of course, to the government of Japan, as per your document, all the expenditure by the Secretariat is done through the contribution that was put forward by Japan, by the government of Japan. So we are still working within this 15 million that was put forward. So it is an acknowledgement and appreciation for the government of Japan on that. So this is my first point. My second point relates to the status of hiring, and the document here has an Annex 2, which is the kind of organizational structure. If you look at this together with the status of hiring, the budget out to spend for the staffing is almost 30% of what was, or the staffing cost 33%. We have expected more hiring to happen. I know that this covers only until the 31st of July, and we are in October, so most probably some hirings have happened between July and now. But yet, I think we expected that quicker staffing to not get rid, but to reduce the amount of funds that are being spent on consultancies and consultancy firms, and which is clearly integral part of this report, and we need really to step out of this interim period into a stable secretariat. So one, what is the status of hiring, in particular for those sections of the secretariat or departments of the secretariat that will be dealing with the projects and the project request for funding coming forward, and how does in your vision, I don't know if this is under this agenda item or another agenda item, how is it responding to the three categories of deliverables of the fund? So if this is being considered or not, and I hope it should be considered in the hiring. So hiring, I think, is something that we wanted to comment on. It is very low compared to the expectation. My last point relates to the communication, and as per your document here on the communication strategy and the communication, you rely on consultants, 5 consultants, I think. And I think this is, it's very important to highlight the importance of this fund and the position of the fund vis-a-vis the rest of the ecosystem of financial institutions and other loss and damage related institutions, and relying only on consultants, while it gives some boosts on the short term, but it doesn't, maybe it does not reflect the importance of the long-term vision of positioning this fund. And going into COP30, which is as important as UNGA, it is also important to understand from you if you have a communication strategy that goes beyond just going to a meeting and delivering a statement here and there, but rather a strategy of engagement to, one, highlight the importance of the fund, two, the position of the fund, and three, also contribute in mobilizing the support for the mobilization of resources for the fund. So those are my 3 comments, and thank you again for this document and for the presentation.
Thank you, Mo. Indeed, we have a specific item on the structure of the Secretariat, but still I would encourage Ibrahima to respond to your question, Mo, this morning. Next is Tosi.
Yes, thank you, JC, and I guess I'm quite aligned with what Mohammed has said, but I just wanted to congratulate Ibrahima on the various elements which he presented, and which I believe is showing that the Secretariat is making great strides and finding its footing. I was happy to meet with Ibrahima in the margins of the African Climate Summit. And thank you, Ibrahima, for making up the time to meet up with my environment minister and the chief of staff of my head of state. Unfortunately, it was not possible to arrange the meeting with my head of state in New York, but my head of state did mention the fund in his remarks during the General Assembly. Also, congratulations for the special event in the margins of the General Assembly, which, as I heard, was a resounding success. I followed a little bit of it online, but unfortunately I could not make it. But just to say that good work. Like Mohammed said, maybe still a lot of reliance on consultants, but I hope that pretty soon there'll be in-house capacity so that we can engage with good quality documents. Because at times, although the quality has improved, the couple of documents whose quality we're still struggling a little bit with. But on a general note, I want to say that I have a positive sentiment, and thank you for your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Tosi. Next is Ali, followed by David.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ibrahima, to you and to your colleagues, team. You have done a lot of work during a very short period of time. We look forward to strengthening of the Secretariat, the quality of documents, as Toshi just mentioned, and timeliness as a shared concern that many of us have. But overall, I think thumbs up. We are in the right direction. I have two small questions to ask. One is, what's your vision about the scientific capacity of the Secretariat in the short term and the long term to lead the loss and damage discourse and the board's work? We need to know the direction of the journey at this stage without necessarily having the specific numbers. And second question is about the process as we issue the call for proposals. What is the process that you have in mind? Not only the turnaround time, but also in terms of your keeping the board in the loop on progress for us to avoid any unintended delays or those kind of elements. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. I will ask Ibrahima to refrain to engage too deeply in the debate about the beam itself, since we will have debate. But he can address part of your question about the capacity of the Secretariat.
Yes, that's within BIM we are talking about.
Okay, David, you are next.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jesse and Ibrahima, for for the report. Just to echo the sentiments made by my colleagues Tosi and Mohammed. I attended the Africa Climate Summit, and it was apparent that there is a very high, I would say, high expectation of the fund, and I'm glad that you were able to hear it for yourself from the statements that were made by various. You alluded to the heads of state as well as ministers, and I think two things were coming out very clear, and the question is, and one of them was, when do we expect the fund to begin to be visible to the countries? and that is a reinforcement of the high expectations that many countries have for this fund. When are we beginning to see the fund operating, or to see the actions on the ground? I think this was a signal that is a sense of urgency that is also attached to the work that we are doing here. The second part was about the resources. And I think many also expressed the fact that they are doubtful in terms of the capacity of the fund. Of course, it's in the early stages. For us, we understand this better. But we have the stakeholders out there who have those expectations that the fund will be able to provide the much needed help for countries that are facing the losses and damages. And so just to mention that it was important for you to hear it for yourself at the platform where many of course heads of state and ministers gathered on the African continent. So the other point is what my colleagues have said as well, that the slow pace at which the staffing is being done is concerning. I think we are moving too slow in my view, and we should have done more in terms of improving the capacity of the Secretariat. I think this is something that we need to change to make sure that we expedite our work by ensuring that we get the staff in place on time. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Oops. Okay, that's, yeah. Oh, okay, so that helps me.
In case you're sleeping.
Yeah, that helps me stop the round of comments and turn to Ibrahima. Sorry, Elena and Jose, you are on my list, so I will come back to you. And others could step in, obviously. But in order for Ibrahima to be able to answer correctly to this first round of questions, I will turn to him right now and come back to you later. Ibrahima, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, JC, and thank you, members of the board, for your constructive feedback and comments. And more, I want to thank you for reminding me an mission that I made, which is to thank Japan for the resources they provided. So I wanted to use this opportunity to say thank you very much, because your resources made it possible for us to get to where we are today. So our appreciation goes to Japan and to the government of Japan as well. I think on the staffing, if you allow me, I want to just share briefly the journey that we took from before, since I came on board, and tell you where we are today. And then you will be pleased to see that we made some progress. I didn't actually mention the progress we made on the staffing. I think the journey has been that at B4, when I came on board, the board gave me resources for 6 months to hire a consultant, hire a consulting firm, continue working with the interim secretariat, and making secondees as long as there's no conflict. But with a very clear guidance over time, you need to reduce this consultant as you get your staff, and that was the first guidance we got from the board. The second one was at B5. When I came in, I told the board, while we actually putting our structure in place, I want you to allow us in our work plan to hire what I call the leads of the different departments, so that we can actually replace the consultant. And that is something that the board approved, and that's why we have the leads that we have. So one of the things we've done to streamline and not having a huge staff at the secretariat, we actually streamlined the 6 lead from 6 to 5, simply because we're able to at least merge partnership and communication resource mobilization together, simply because most of the work on partnership or communication will be actually boosting our resource mobilization efforts, and that's why we thought it's a good combination and reporting directly to the executive director. So at B6, then we came back I would say at least at B5, the board decided to launch the BIM and ask us to make some efforts whereby our structure would reflect what the board wants to do, which is the BIM. And that's the reason why we suggested to you have a BIM delivery team, which will help us to at least have the capacities. And then at B6, then we talked about actually growing our staff beyond just the leads to get the operational staff. And as of B7 today, which we have not, obviously, I'm on board and Deputy ED is on board. The 5 leads we're hiring, transparent and open. 2 have been selected and accepted. And we were hoping to bring them here to this meeting and officially announce that, but 2 of them are in the room. And then the 3 additional staff, we are at the stage whereby the last interview will be done with me, and by the end of October, we'll get the 5 leads, so the management team of the Secretariat will be completed from myself, the Deputy ED, and then the rest of the management team. And then our next target with the blessing and the support of the co-chairs of the Budget Committee is the additional budget we're asking you and then to move into the recruitment of the operational staff. So the implication it will have, you will see less and less consulting firm at the Secretariat. You will see less consultant actually being hired at the Secretariat. So we're going to gradually retire, obviously, this consultant and make sure the work is actually done in-house. The interim secretary is no longer going to be obviously supporting us. So our hope is that in a very no distance future, hopefully by B8, you will see a completely different configuration of the Secretariat, and that is what we're doing. And I'm pleased that the rest of the team is supporting me, particularly the Deputy ED, in leading the panel for the initial selection. But I have a call and a decision to make in every single recruitment within the Secretariat because of my accountability to the board, and that's the reason why it's important I get involved. Ambassador Mo, with regard to the communication strategy, it's not just attending high-level event. We actually do have a communication strategy that outlines why are we communicating, where do we communicate, how do we communicate, who our targets are. Now, what's visible, obviously, is a high-level event because it happened at UNGA, but behind the scene, there's a lot being put together in terms of our presentations, our corporate videos to be able to explain about the fund, our website to make sure we actually update, and eventually also the talking points that we have that are fully aligned with the messaging of the board so that there is a message alignment between the Secretariat and the board. I just want to reassure you that there is a communication strategy as well. With regard to Ambassador Tosi, I welcome obviously your heads of state advocating for the fund. This has been very much aligned with our communication whereby we need to keep the momentum, whereby the heads of state will definitely continue to underscore the importance of continuing to advocate for the fund. And I want to use this opportunity to thank the board members. Many of you have been extremely helpful in opening doors for us to actually either speak to your heads of state or speak to your various leadership so that we can actually expand the fund. And this is something that we intend to continue leveraging the board to advocate and communicate the work of the fund. With regard to Board Member Ali, on the capacities, yes, we're not in the maximum capacity where we want to be, but I'm not going to use the analogy I said before that Richard corrected me. We're not flying the plane as we build it, but we have to keep up with the board. And that's the reason why our suggestion about having the BIM delivery team is a direct reflection of what the board wants to do and make sure we can keep up. And that obviously capacity boosts will come over time, but I will get the chance to go more into details when we talk about the organizational structure. But the organizational structure addresses the needs of today, but also the needs of the future as we build the longer-term policies. And then, David, I agree, as I answer your questions with regard to the staffing, we're making progress. And I confirm when we come to your country in Zambia in B8, you will see more behind, in addition to myself, the rest of the management team. What it does for us, you don't have to just listen to the ED. You also have to listen to all the program managers run the different units, and that is the team work that I want to convey to the board. It's a group of people dedicated to supporting the board. So over to you, Jean-Christophe.
Thank you, Ibrahima, for this clarification and very good information about your hiring process and where you stand at this stage. I have 4 more speakers, so I will start with Elena, followed by José, Hiroki, and Gérard.
Thank you, JC, and thank you, Ibrahima, for the presentation and the report. Really encouraged by the progress made by the Secretariat, and as well, I want to thank the Interim Secretariat for the work that they've done in building the fund and the board as we move into actual operationalization. And as well, take the opportunity as well to thank the government of Japan for their contribution that has made this happen so far. I have more of a very specific question, and this more relates, Ibrahima, because I know you mentioned in the report in some of the mandates that were given to the Secretariat in relation to the focal points and the NDAs. And you mentioned that the status of implementation, the Secretariat has reached out to focal points, providing background and guidance to facilitate engagement with the Secretariat. Has this been done more on those that have already been nominated to the Secretariat? I know there in the website there is a list of, I think so far, 5 countries that have been sent their NDAs and their focal points to the Secretariat. And what sort of outreach has been done to countries so that they can effectively nominate or designate their NDAs and focal points? I think this is very key that there is that outreach. NDAs will play a very significant role within the BIM, and I think that we have to really start potentially thinking of how we increase that number of countries that do start to designate their NDAs more and more so increasingly fast now that the call for proposals will be there. So maybe what has been done and what it might be the strategy going forward. Maybe, like I think Ambassador Mo mentioned COP. I think COP will be a great space to do that as well. So yeah, and to also thank you for, you mentioned the website being available in Spanish and French and potentially other language. I think that's very good, and continue to encourage that into other languages. Thank you, Ibrahima.
Thank you, Elena, for raising this question. I think it's quite a key question in order to implement BIM properly. Next is José, followed by Hiroki and Gérard.
Thank you, Jean-Christophe. Good morning, colleagues. Let me start by thanking the government of Philippines for the reception yesterday evening. It's always a pleasure of visiting the host country of the board, and this time is no different. And let me also thank the government of Japan, not only for the initial contribution, but also for Hiroki's great work in the budget committee. That's really appreciated. I do have a couple of comments, and let me maybe start with the report of the execution, of the budget execution. And we have to be very aware that we are in the middle of a transition to the permanent secretariat in terms of the budgetary dimension. Now, with that being said, I think that we have also in other documents very important steps anchored and included, in particular the work plan and budget of next year. It is the intention of the budget committee to sit down with the secretariat and discuss how the recruitment plan is linked to the budget request. And I would add an additional layer that is very vital, and we should be discussing under various agenda items. It is how the deliverables for the upcoming 1 and 2 years is linked to budget and to recruitment. And I'm not seeing the full picture yet. I know that it's work in progress, but it would be good, and I think for the benefit of the entire board, of seeing that as soon as possible. Let me also reiterate one of the points made by Mo on communications. The resources that we will be investing in communications are significant. And I think Belém will be very important also including on FILD guidance. it would be clear and very important, Ibrahima, for you not only to as you have done today, explain your strategy in a nutshell, but also to report back and of the lessons learned. We are an innovative and learning institution, and it would be good to understand whether there needs to be extra work in proper positioning this institution, the broader international climate finance landscape. So that kind of feedback loop would be really appreciated. I'll stop there. I think we have other agenda items, especially on the initial structure of the institution, to discuss other budgetary matters that are of importance to us.
Thank you, Jose. And certainly about your first point and your suggestions, it's important, I think, for this board to be sure that the need to monitor correctly, properly the budget does not prevent the Secretariat to build up its capacity. So it's quite an important element, and I appreciate your suggestions on my side. Next is Hiroki, followed by Gérard and Antoine.
Thank you very much, Jean-Christophe. Let me begin to convey our sincere thank you for the government of the Philippines to host this board meeting on behalf of the government of Japan. So every time we visit here, so we excavate the new aspect of the history and culture of the Philippines. I would like to express my appreciation for the efforts being made by the Secretariat, so especially on the promotion of our activities. So as the FILD is in its nascent stage, I acknowledge with respect the challenges involved in managing the Secretariat's operations, as the mandate and the necessary resources corresponding to its mandate for the Secretariat continue to evolve and change every board meeting. Having said that, our primary task at hand is the operationalization of Raphael's implementation modality. So to achieve this, it is crucial for the Secretariat to study precedents set by similar institutions and to develop a framework unique to the FILD for the board's consideration. So securing adequate resources to support these efforts is of utmost importance. But at the same time, as the mandate expands and the budget increase, it is imperative that there is timely and appropriate disclosure of information from the Secretariat to ensure transparency and accountability. I would like to ask the Secretariat to continue collaborating with the board to discuss at the appropriate place, for example, maybe the budget committee, how best to fulfill its accountability obligations. I won't touch in detail now, but I would like to raise this point. I would like to convey this message to the board, all of the board members on the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, Hiroki. Gérard.
Thanks, JC, and good morning, colleagues. And I'd follow others in thanking and acknowledging the government of the Philippines for their hospitality last night. And also, thank you, Ibrahima, to you, the team, Deputy ED, and also, as Mathilde said yesterday, to the outgoing members of the Interim Secretariat for their work over this period. And I'd also follow Mo and others in thanking Japan for their financing of this. It's extremely important. My overall question, Ibrahima, is about organizational maturity over this transition, as Jose said, and your assurance to us as a board and your grip over this, because this is an important pivot point as the interim secretariat leaves stage left and you build the new independent secretariat. There hasn't been much time between B6 and B7, and we now have some time up to B8, but the demands are increasing as we go. And so, firstly, I'd echo others in supporting the discussion about how you grow the Secretariat at the right pace, at the right time, with the right capability, recognizing that you both need the organizational capability, but also the delivery capability, and it'd be useful to talk about that. It is also vital, as Jose has just said, that the Secretariat clearly shows that linkage and gives us the assurance as a board that those deliverables, budget lines, and recruitment are acting in concert to build up to that organizational capability and maturity. So I'm really asking you overall what assurances you can give us as we move through this transition to B8, as the interim secretariat peels away, that you can continue to build the organizational maturity of the secretariat and the sort of what indicators there are around that for us, but at the same time produce us as a board the high quality, timely, evidence-based advice that we need to make the decisions that we do need to do. And I would say in that, it's also important for us as a board that we are also transitioning as secretariat capacity grows. So I hope the board also moves to sort of strategic supervision, as colleagues have said here, and enable the secretariat to make the sort of decisions and the detail that it needs to make. So we need to work through that transition. And then finally, just a comment on communications. It's great that we're getting that communications out there. Communications need to be confident, and ultimately, I think as we all know, what will give us confidence is the impact that we are making, and therefore just to underscore the importance of getting on with the BIM and being able to describe those stories of what actually this fund is achieving is really important. I look forward to that, which clearly has a result link to the results management framework when we get there. Thanks, JC.
Thank you, Gérard. Antoine, and then I will turn back to Ibrahima.
Thank you, Jean-Christophe. And thank you, Ibrahima, for the very interesting presentation and report. I think I can start by, like others, the colleagues, commend the Secretariat for the breadth and the intensity of all the work that has been carried out over the past month. From the institutional consolidation, the recruitment, the development of the BIM, partnerships, communication. There's been a lot happening, and so congratulations for that. Having said that, so that scope of progress is indeed broad. And the report presents these different work streams in a rather parallel way, and we are mindful that this is also the board that's been asking the Secretariat to deliver rapid progress across multiple fronts at the same time. But I think it's also legitimate and useful for the Secretariat to indicate where it sees the main priorities at this stage and how it intends to sequence and its efforts internally. And I think when we also look at the budget execution, and thanks also for the generosity of the government of Japan, I think budget short term is not the limiting factor to the build-up, and so this means it's all the more relevant to look at the question of how you strategically focus your efforts and sequence and choose your priorities. And so I would just have an open question, a general question about your vision of priorities and how you intend to balance and strike the right balance across all those areas of progress, and where you think we should consider most critical to consolidate first, and what can or may evolve progressively in parallel or over time. Thank you.
Thank you, Antoine. Ibrahima.
Thank you very much, members of the board, again, for your very constructive feedback on the presentation that we made. Just a couple of responses very quickly, starting with Elena. Well, first of all, when the board made a decision on the focal point, a number of countries proactively first reached out to us and began to write formal letters to designate their focal point, which is very encouraging, because A, it shows they're following the decision that you're making, but more importantly, they're following the progress that the fund is making as well. In addition to that, we're using a couple of opportunities to get the message out. One in the high-level event that we're participating, where you have a group of stakeholders in the room. It's always an opportunity for me to make the case that we are welcoming, obviously, focal point, and that may have resonated with a number of countries who basically convey the message to their countries as well. Second, in the bilateral meeting that I have, either at the country or some of this high-level event, I met a couple of ministers who were actually quite surprised that this has been decided and they have not sent, and I've seen a couple of countries who, following the meeting with me and the meeting with the team, have actually sent the focal point to us formally. And then third, if you go to the website that we have today, there's guidelines for countries to actually provide the focal point. And that is something that obviously that we will make sure at least the countries have access to that information so they can send their focal point. Fourth, we are actively relying on other partners, the EXCOM, the Santiago Network and others to get the word out so that they will at least make sure countries send their focal point as well. So as of today, I've just been briefed by the team. We have about 20 focal points actually listed in our website. And I think the last time that we met, we had at least about 1 or 2 on the website. Not all of them are actually on the website for now, but I think we have some in the website, and we update them as they arrive. So I am counting on the board members to use, obviously, your platform, your contact, to make sure the information goes out so we can get the focal point. Now, obviously, this is all connected to how we deliver the BIM, because the focal point, the minute that I designate the focal point, they say, well, when do we get to business? So to speak, is regard to sending out requests. So it's very important that those two go hand in hand as well. Jose, I totally agree with you, and we have this conversation time again. It's not just about the cost, it's also about the benefits. So we're asking resources to the board. As you will see in our work plan presentation, we highlighted where we will be focusing our efforts, but we also highlighted a long list of deliverables where we said, if you're giving us these resources, this is what we are committed to delivering. And I know the co-chairs of the Budget Committee and the members of the Budget Committee are extremely supportive in providing guidance to make sure we connect costs, but also benefits in terms of result as well. And I totally agree on the lessons learned with regard to the communication and positioning. Now, obviously, what is standing on the way for our positioning to be more aggressive is that we need to start delivering, having result and impact, so we can tell a story about the fund being impactful. Those two go hand in hand. So there is a bit of a risk not to over-communicate and under-deliver. And I think that's the reason why those two have to go hand in hand. So hopefully, as we move on the BIM, and then we'll certainly get into the level where we can communicate more. Yuroki, I totally agree. We already started this conversation under the co-chair's guidance in the Budget Committee. We are absolutely committed to disclosure and transparency of every information we do on behalf of the board. And I think Jose and Mark, the co-chairs, can test, they're guiding us to make sure at least we provide all the details. But in addition to that, we always remain available to the board in providing information. With regard to Gerald, how are we actually growing the Secretariat? I'm looking at this from basically what I call at 3 levels. There's what I call in the short term, and this the board wants to launch the early intervention. It requires resources, particularly capacities, to actually deliver and support that short term. The second layer is what I call the medium term, as the board continues to scaling up what we do in the BIM to get to sort of more impact and more result. And then the third level is really building the longer term policies so we can have a sustainable secretariat to support basically the work of the board. So out of that, if you look at today staffing, there's a huge focus in making sure that we build what I call the fundamentals of the secretariat. And that is the leadership team, the management team in different areas where we will be delivering. And by end of October, that team will be actually finalized, and that being us what I call the fundamentals really of the secretariat. Now the second layer is the operational, the analysts, the experts that we need to bring on board in supporting the different departments, so that those two combined will help us to deliver in terms of what the board wants to do. And then I think to your point about my vision is we're a startup. It's an evolving process. The challenges will come over time, and we need to have a secretary that's going to actually adapt to those needs of the board, and that's the way we are looking at it. And I think it addresses your concern, Antoine, with regard to our priorities, short-term, medium-term, and long-term, so that we have a secretary that can actually keep up with the expectations of the board. The one thing we take obviously very seriously, we don't want to grow too fast and too slow as a secretariat. We don't want to become a huge secretariat with a lot of staff. As you will see in our staffing plan, we're trying to make sure we got people who can be multitasking so we can actually deliver for the board. But the intention is not to really have a huge secretariat, but to have an efficient secretariat that can deliver on what the board expects from us. And that's the way we're doing. On the communication, final statement, we'll be more than happy to brief the board and the progress we're making in our communication and the positioning of the fund so that you see at least what we're being impactful way to communicate. But the majority of our communication is really support our stakeholder engagement. So we make sure at least the fund is known to those who are supposed to know them so that we can position, but also communicate with credibility, not just communicating on aspiration, but communicating on really what this fund is delivering, and that's where the credibility comes from. Over to you, Jean-Christophe.
Thank you very much, Ibrahima, for taking the time to answer any of our questions and comments. I do think that the points raised by Elena is probably worth a discussion when we come to BIM question whether we need a proactive strategy to reach out to the focal point in order for the vulnerable countries to be able to take really advantage of the BIM. On that, if there is no more comment or question, can I take the board? No, not. Adao, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Jean-Christophe, and let me start by congratulating the government of the Philippines and also thanking the government of the Philippines for hosting us, and also last night's very nice dinner, and of course thanking the government of Japan for the contribution. I think that's a real thing that we need to look forward. And my second point is going directly to the focal points or designated national authorities. I just have a check the list, and I just do see that only few of 5 countries are nominating and sending their nominees, and it's not enough. So what we would like to request to the Secretariat to do so would be sending email to the respective UNFC focal points under the UNFC to send their nominees by having the sort of criteria that we agree upon, and it's on the web. Communicate this to them because this is urgent need. Otherwise, funding requests will be launched at COP30, but will be nothing. So I think this is quite urgent issue. Thank you, Helena, for raising this issue, but this is quite critical to help us how to implement the BIM itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adao, for emphasizing Elena's request. I do think we have something to do in addition to what is done so far within the decision that we're going to take on BIM. So that's something that we make sure to revisit when we will take the decision on BIM. Any idea is welcome. You are suggesting one. Maybe there are others in order to have a more proactive strategy on this outreach to developing countries. You want to react?
Now, just quickly to say to Ambassador Dar, there are 2 processes. The countries write to us, and we keep that in the Secretariat, but the countries have to give us the consent to publish it in the website. So what you see in the website is not a reflection of all the focal point we receive formally, but those are only those who actually give us the consent to actually put it in the website. But your suggestion about more outreach certainly is well taken. So we'll make sure we can at least get as many focal point officially as possible. But thank you.
Thank you, Ibrahima. But I do think that the board should take a decision on that to task you with some kind of formal outreach strategy if we really want for the BIM to reach its target. On that, can I now take that the board is ready to take note of document FRLD/B7/3 and FRLD/B7/4? Seeing no objection, the documents are so noted. Thank you, colleagues. And I will now close this agenda item and turn to my fellow co-chair to take on the next agenda item. Richard.
Okay, thank you, Jean-Christophe. So I'm going to try and do something that the SP chairs do, is open multiple things at one time, tell you what we want you to do, and then kick you off out of the room to go and do work, right? Or have lunch and go and have dialogue with civil society. So just bear with me. So we're now going to go to agenda item 6. Agenda item 8 and agenda item 10B. I'm going to open all 3 issues. And so 6 is the issues related to the Barbados implementation plan. So that's the 2 documents, which is the funding cycle and the funding criteria, right? So that's 6. 8 is the long-term resource mobilization strategy. And then 10B, if I'm correct on my agenda, is the co-chair's report on the engagements with the interim trustee, which is the issue related to direct access modalities on 49, 49A and 49B and C, right? Because it's a procedural discussion, so to recall, we had a detailed discussion yesterday in the informal where we discussed the substance of all those 3 issues, right? What you have in front of you under 6 is the papers on the funding cycle and the funding criteria. Elena, I got my numbers wrong. Elena is my diary keeper. My days are wrong. So is it 7? Okay, it says 6 here. Can I get an updated agenda, please? It's 7 or 6. Sorry, just bear with me. It's 7, right? So we're opening 7, 8, and 10B, right? So agenda item 7, my notes are wrong, is the funding criteria. So you've got those 2 documents. What we expect you to do in those documents is we need to approve the annexes, and then we need to approve the covering decision, which, as we discussed yesterday, may contain certain elements. So on this matter, we're going to task a small group, which will be made up of board members, alternate board members, and advisors. And just to confirm the process, either could speak, but please try and not make sure that you have a board member, advisor, and an alternate from the same seat speaking, right? So try and make sure that you at least have, because there are going to be 3 groups, right? And that group is going to be co-facilitated by Elena and Gerard, right? And our task to you is to discuss any changes that colleagues may wish to make in relation to the annex so we can adopt the funding criteria and the funding cycle, and then also discuss any elements that are interrelated to the cycle but don't fit in the cycle, such as the transparency and reporting of the Secretariat on the status of funding requests and where they are, or any other matters as we discussed yesterday. There is a matter that we asked the board to consider is whether the funding requests come only from the NDAs or also come from the entities. And there was a proposal yesterday by Mo on allowing the flexibility for both. So please either find a way to amend in the annex or put it in the cover decision. The only request that we have as co-chairs is please don't end up with a list of 100 changes. So this thing is not about getting the system perfect. This thing is about confirming what criteria we're going to use to assess projects or what we want to see parties input in and how we assess them and what is the cycle. And again, colleagues, perfection is the enemy of the good in this case. Make sure it's right and robust, but we can get certain things we may have to just delay for future discussion. So that group, so members who want to go to that group, so that's 7. On 8 is the long-term resource mobilization strategy, and co-chairs have presented to you a draft decision on what we expect to conclude in a decision at this meeting. We took a number of comments yesterday from the board in the informal, so please pick up where the discussion is based on the draft, amend accordingly, and come back to us with a draft text. And on this one, we're going to task Ambassador Thompson and Simon, there we go, Simon, to co-facilitate that discussion. And again, the same principles would apply. Board members, alternate board members, and advisors may speak, but just try and make sure that only one representative from a seat is speaking. The final group is agenda item 10B, which is the co-chair's report on our engagement with the interim trustee in relation to the access modalities 49A, 49B, and 49C. And yesterday, we also had a conversation on this. The co-chairs have provided you some recommendations. We're still working on the supplemental documentation, which is the process, just so that you know what other funds do, as well as the list. We're not ready to give that to you right now. So that may just be, but it'll come today. And really what we wanted you to discuss is the matter of whether or not, please just confirm your agreement with co-chair's proposed way forward on the further work that needs to be done, which is the risk management committee and then the technical nature of the assessments of stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 to confirm the functional equivalence related to 49A, both for governments and also for 49A Part 2 for MDBs, right, and other entities. And then that's the one thing we need you to resolve. And as you recall yesterday, there was, again, two different approaches. One was to launch the further work, and then once the further work was approved, to make sure that then the call is open to direct budget support, particularly for 49A Part 1. That was one avenue. The other avenue was to launch the call for proposals, which included the option of national government submitting direct budget supports under 49A Part 1, but subject to, so no decision would be taken subject to the board's conclusion of the technical work that needs to happen. So it's the chicken and egg, and we have two different variables. We're still discussing with the World Bank. The other issue that we have to decide is to what extent does the listing in 49B also have to include an endorsement statement that not only are the entities that are listed able to access, but there's functional equivalence in that. And so we'll have to come back to you on exactly when that one is. So please just focus at this point in time on confirming agreement on the further work, as well as whether we should wait until the further work is completed to launch the call for direct budget support under 49A Part 1, or whether we can launch the call now, but subject to the further work being concluded. And then we'll come back to you with the other papers. So that is essentially the work that we want to task you to do. And depending on when we conclude the dialogue with civil society, we'll then get you into your breakout groups. And on this matter, we've asked Dan and Kirsty to co-facilitate those discussions. The Secretariat will be in the room with you to assist in note-taking and any track change amendments that you want to have. Again, the request is make sure that we're not having 1,000 changes, but that we're making sure that the documents, the process is robust and correct, and it meets the standards that we've agreed to in the governing instrument and the trustee agreement and the hosting agreement. And then we expect you to come back to us in the morning, at least for the co-facilitators, to brief the co-chairs on the status of the outcomes, and then we'll give you more time to do work tomorrow with the expectation that by as soon as possible we can come back with conclusions. So we want work to be focused and targeted and not please don't reopen everything. If there's a necessity to reopen anything, the co-chairs will go back to the original documentation and ask you to adopt that one in order to get an outcome. Because if we leave here without the funding criteria and the project cycle, we're unable to launch the call. If we leave here without confirming the access modalities, we simply don't know who's even can submit proposals and who those entities are, so we simply won't be able to proceed with the BIM. And then on the third issue of the resource mobilization, it is about the long-term future resources of the fund that we know will start to be depleted towards the end of 2027, and noting what's in the governing instrument that we've agreed upon, we would need to put a process in place to action that. So again, those are the three core outcomes of this meeting that will essentially, we hope, send a very positive message to parties in Belém that we're making progress in this fund. There are, of course, other core outcomes that we need to approve here. It's not just those three. We still have to approve the budget and other elements. So I hope that task is clear. I have one more issue to ask the board members that Jibril, you want to talk on what I've just said or not about what I'm about to say? Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Richard. I appreciate your flexibility. No, for me, I have one clarification question to you. I want to know exactly what's the link between the point 7 and the point 10B. In 7, he said operationalization with Barbados implementation modalities. And in 10B, it is the outcome of the co-share consultation with the interim trustee to identify the modalities for facilitating direct access via direct budget supports. Only the 49A. And in the 7, what we will do exactly in this item? Because I think it is include the 10B is included in the 7. So what we will do there? I want to know exactly the scope of our work and try to be efficient, not to do the same work in this. Thank you.
Jibril, the outcome of the conversations on 10B would need to be reflected in the project cycle in 7, right? So you're probably going to need to just put a placeholder in relation to those issues in 7, right? The link here is only a procedural link that these are the 3 pieces of work that we want to task the board to work this afternoon in the small groups. But beyond that, there is no association. But assuming that the colleagues in the direct access, in the 10B stuff conclude a matter, it needs to be reflected in 7 in the project cycle. So I think on those matters, I would suggest you just put a placeholder subject to the outcome of the deliberations under 10B, right? So don't have a conversation on those matters because they're being discussed in another group. Okay. Okay, Jean-Christophe?
Yeah, I mean, just to react to your point, Jibril, you're right. We are talking about beam in point 7 and point this 10B. But the fact is that the item 7 has only documentation on the two aspects of project cycle and funding cycle. So the only item which deals with access modalities is the sub-item 10B. So since Richard rightly pointed out that we need these three items: project cycle, funding cycle, and access modalities. And this is precisely on that point that I wanted to rebound on the timing of all of that. Just wanted to remind you that when we agreed on all of that and the points raised by Richard, we will have to also agree on the terms of reference. And that needs to be worked out by the Secretariat to inject every decision that we will be ready to take on project cycle, on funding cycle, and on access modalities on these terms of reference. That will be done by the Secretariat, but only when we have clarity on this decision. This is why I strongly suggest for the facilitators to come back to us no later than early in the morning of Wednesday, in order for us to be able to put together all the elements on the decision text, and also for the Secretariat to be able to work on the terms of reference, to be able to bring these terms of reference before the board on Thursday. And also, I understand from some of you that you need to come back to your capital to check on some of the elements of the decision text. So it will be necessary for us to come to present to you the proposed decision text by Wednesday evening, in order for you to be able to get feedback from your capitals on Thursday. So that's within this time frame that we have to work, and this is why we have no time to lose, and this is why this afternoon will be pretty cleared for the facilitating group to work and to deliver.
Okay, thank you for that, Jean-Christophe. So I hope this is clear. We'll sit and make sure the co-facilitators can brief you again if it's not clear. So before I close or suspend this matter, I want to ask the board's guidance on one matter that, not on whether we can play music. So procedurally, we're now entering into the decision-making phase. Although this is not going to be done in the board, it's in small groups. Whatever the small groups do, come back to the board. I want to ask you, as there's been a request to us as co-chairs, and we need your guidance and permission. The active observers have asked to be observing in the rooms. We didn't discuss this yesterday, so we were not sure we wanted to make a ruling without seeking your guidance. In our view as co-chairs, they would normally observe a decision-making process anyway without speaking. So we would have no concern if they were able to observe the deliberations in the small groups, almost as if they are in the UNFCCC, where they're able to sit and observe contact groups or informals. And so we want to seek the board's consent that they may observe those small group deliberations as a minimum. Can I get the board's... Can we stop the music, please? Was that Jose making the music from Vienna? So Jose, you have the floor.
We have great music in Vienna, but this one isn't on us. No, listen, Richard, I think that we were trying to make things differently in this institution, and I think that being inclusive and being transparent is part of that game. On the contrary, I would very much welcome the observers observing our deliberations on these three very important matters.
Okay, thank you, Jose, for that. I see no other flags, so yes, the active observers may be able to observe the deliberations, but again, as it's a decision-making point, you're just simply observing the discussion. So thank you very much. We will give you the details of the rooms later. So on this matter, I'm going to suspend the discussion, and I'm going to move now to yeah, I'm just trying to get the number. Agenda item 13, which is the dialogue with civil society that we have on an annual basis. So again, colleagues, this is an opportunity for the active observers to share views with the board. The time is now 20 past 11, and we'll continue to 12:30, at which we will then break for lunch. And I also believe the active observers have invited the board members to join them outside in a protest regarding filling the fund, right? Is that what it's called, Tasneem? I hand the floor over to you, Tasneem.
Thank you, Co-Chair, and greetings to all board members. The CSO dialogue timing has shifted. We were supposed to apparently have it in the afternoon. We just plead for a little bit of time so that we can coordinate ourselves to get us. Only one person per constituency is apparently allowed into the room.
No, we can have more.
Now we can. But we need to get people from 2 minutes to get ourselves ready, please.
Okay, 2 minutes, and then we'll open the agenda item formally. So you'll just tell us when you're ready, Tasneem. The board members, just please remain in the room if you need to. Obviously, if you need to go outside the room, you can go outside the room. Please call board members outside. We're delaying. Jose, can you please do a budget request for those those ankle bracelets that criminals have for the board members on tell time so we can ping them? Ding, ding, you need to be back in the room.
Last time I looked at what coaches are supposed to do is to manage the boards, but I'm
Well,
happy
we
to
manage
find
the
some.
board, but the board just gets up and leaves. So you're unmanageable right now. item. Tasneem, I hope you guys are ready. So, as has become a practice in this fund, we have a dedicated agenda item. Colleagues, please take your seats. We have a standing agenda item every board meeting where we have a dialogue between the board and civil society organizations. They specifically asked us to have this dialogue before we break into the breakout groups so that they have an opportunity to share their views on the issues that we would be discussing. So on that front, I'm going to give the floor to our colleagues from civil society to lead the discussion. Tasneem, I believe you're going to moderate on your side. So over to you, Tasneem.
Thank you very much, co-chairs and board members. Again, thank you for arranging the CSO dialogue. We appreciate this engagement with parties on the key issues on your agenda for this board meeting as well. Now, the format of the CSO dialogue, of course, is meant to be a dialogue between civil society and the board itself. However, we have not been given the opportunity to raise our substantive issues in the informal meeting held yesterday, and certainly we have not been given the opportunity to raise our ideas and share our ideas on the substantive issues in this meeting today. And so that is therefore going to be an apology to all of you that what you will get from civil society is a series of interventions, because this is the only opportunity that we would have to put our positions on the record. So we understand that parties find it really difficult to follow a series of interventions, but this is the only option we have available to us, as I have mentioned, to actually put on record our views, our substantive interventions as well. So that's by way of apology. We would also like to thank the board members for the decision just made earlier to allow observers into the small rooms to observe. So much appreciated for that flexibility as well. I believe very strongly that over time, as we move into the kind of long-term setting up of the modalities for this board, that there would be more substantive and meaningful opportunities for observer engagement in these processes. So with that, thank you again, and I will now hand over to Mwana Hamishi, who is the Women and Gender Focal Point Lead, and she will lead the first intervention, and I'll introduce the others once that intervention is complete. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Tas. Allow me to remind the board, and thank you, Co-Chair, as well. Allow me to remind the board that this board meeting is the first since the International Court of Justice delivered its historic advisory opinion on the legal obligation of the states in respect to climate change. This authoritative legal opinion clarifies the state loss and damage obligation, and it has significant implication for ensuring that the fund will effectively deliver resources at scale and directly to the communities on the front line of the climate crisis, in the line of the rights and remedy of the people in the front line. So it is an important context and call to action for the board. And we believe strongly that this advisory opinion should guide discussion here, especially on resource mobilization, funding criteria, and access modality. We would like to highlight three important implications of that decision. First, the opinion has clarified that states have a duty to provide the resources at scale of the loss and damage needs. based on the common but differentiated responsibility. This is critical for resource mobilization strategies, as I said, both in terms of the scale that is needed to be aimed, but also on how that resources will reach communities. The board must move beyond voluntary contribution and periodic pledging conferences to clarify differentiated obligation with concrete pathway to make polluters pay and big polluters accountable. Second implication of this decision is related to all those harmed by climate crisis have right to remedy rather than charitable assistance. This has a critical implication for the decision on access to the fund. Bureaucratic rules and limitation imposed by the World Bank as a fund trustee cannot stand in the way of all climate vulnerable developing countries having a direct access to the fund. Moreover, as the ICJ affirmed, the legal consequences of the state wrongful act extend to peoples and individuals, making direct community access a matter of right and not just a discretion. Last implication, the third one, is the international human rights law must guide loss and damage response as a legal requirement for all states. This is not just the matter of good practice. The fund startup phase and the long-term operation should recognize that losses and damages first and foremost are human rights violation and need to be adjusted accordingly. Loss and damage needs assessment must explicitly include human rights criteria and non-economic losses for damages, and that the fund must urgently develop policies to do no harms and to ensure inclusive, participatory, and accountable operation that protect ecosystems, human rights, and include indigenous people. We wanted to start this dialogue with reflecting on these decisions because of its implication. As the advisory opinion is a result of the consensus-based request from the UN General Assembly, and therefore we expect all countries, including those who are present in this board meeting, to translate this decision into practice. This is important context for this board meeting, and for that I yield back to my colleague.
Thank you very much, Mishi. And so that framing of the ICJAO opinion is critical for all the other elements on your agenda. I will hand over to Hajid now, who will deal with resource mobilization. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Tasneem. Thank you, co-chairs and board members. I'm Harjeet Singh from Fatat Sampada Climate Foundation, and I'm speaking on behalf of ENGO Climate Action Network. Speaking about the resource mobilization strategy, I think we must acknowledge that the work so far on the resource mobilization strategy is a critical failure. It shows a profound lack of ambition, completely misaligned with the scale of the climate crisis and the mandate of this fund. There is no credible plan yet. It has no financial targets, and we cannot ignore the demand for grants and push debt-creating instruments instead. And by deferring decisions to B9 and delaying the replenishment cycle to 2027, it betrays the vulnerable communities who are still waiting for support. Let's be clear about the reality we face. Recent scientific analysis estimates that the needs for addressing loss and damage at a staggering average of $395 billion for 2025 alone. The annual need could be as high as $937 billion. A resource mobilization strategy that ignores this reality and its legal and moral obligation is an exercise in futility. These obligations have been recently affirmed by the International Court of Justice, as you have just heard. Therefore, our strategy must be grounded in the foundational principles of climate justice, and we know all of them. The polluter pays principle, equity, common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities, and acknowledging the historical responsibility of developed nations. So we don't need to start from scratch. We need a credible and just blueprint with three core elements. Number one, define real finance. Loss and damage funding must be 100% grants, non-debt creating, new additional and predictable finance. And remember, we need this money to recover the lost development, which we had. Second, set an ambitious target. This board must establish a science-based goal with a trajectory towards the assessed need of $400 billion annually. And we need it sooner than later. Every day that passes without real resources flowing in is another day that injustice happens. Third, secure the resources. The approach must be clear. Primary source, obligatory grant-based public finance from developed countries. Supplementary sources, innovative levies such as financial transaction tax or climate damages tax and so on. Now, these also cannot replace developed country obligations, as developed countries are obligated to pay for addressing loss and damage. So co-chairs and board members, we as civil society cannot endorse a strategy or a roadmap that is currently being discussed, which actively avoids resource mobilization at scale. So we urge you to prepare a strategy that incorporates these core elements. So the choice is between a fund that merely exists and the one that delivers. The choice is between perpetuating injustice and providing real support in the form of reparations. We demand you choose justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hajid. I will now hand over to Liddy, who will be speaking about the funding cycle. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. Many board members expressed a desire for assurance that the Secretariat would share information about the proposals in the pipeline, including those that ultimately are not submitted to the board for approval. We echo this call for transparency and would like to build on it, including by asking that the full assessment of all proposals are made publicly available without any reduction in case of potential private sector involvement. We would like to see a mandate and commitment to set the best precedent for the long-term operation of the fund for transparency and openness throughout this process, in line with the rights to access to information and participation. Proposal documents and consultations, or at the minimum summaries thereof, should be made publicly accessible so that board members, observers, and others outside the Secretariat staff are able to provide input rather than simply seeing a package of final proposals sent to the board for a yes or no approval. Our experience in the Green Climate Fund is that once proposals reach the board for decision, it is too late to make any meaningful inputs or offer feedback for improvements. Public disclosure is necessary and indeed very vital for the quality of the pipeline proposal. We now turn to our broader concern with the funding cycle discourse. We echo the points made by others that this seems to be a very traditional funding cycle proposal that does not reflect the ways in which the FRLD is expected to be innovative and appropriate for its mission. The BIM as a pilot phase should be a testing ground for new ideas and more suitable responses to loss and damage. We urgently need a dedicated cycle and mechanism for rapid response to ensure the FRLD can deliver support within 48 hours of an extreme loss and damage event. This should be designed to provide opportunities for learning as the fund transitions into its long-term arrangements. This was our original vision for the core function of the FRLD, and indeed it's quite simple. A country is hit by a disaster, a climate disaster, and it needs money immediately without being forced to take out emergency loans that must be repaid. Pakistan, for example, has been hit by 3 major floods this year alone and is still waiting for money. A fundamental purpose of the FRLD should be to fill that gap and ensure this injustice does not happen. The traditional bureaucracy of the proposed funding cycle simply does not fit this purpose. As a pilot phase, the BIM should offer a simplified, non-bureaucratic process for immediate access to funding in the wake of disaster.
Thank you very much. Lydia, I will hand over to Isidus, who will talk about funding criteria.
Good evening. No, good morning. We appreciate having the paper, yet key elements remain unclear in the current formulation of both the funding criteria and the assessment methodology. Without stronger equity safeguards, this fund risks reproducing patterns that leave frontline communities behind. First, on country-led and country-owned approaches, we note and welcome the calling for responsiveness to country priorities while taking into account the needs of climate-vulnerable communities aligned with the governing instrument, and uphold the fund's call for locally rooted access as well, exemplifying in 49D. However, this reference must not remain rhetorical. It should be operationalized as a core part of the assessment methodology, with vulnerability and participation reflected in prioritization. True ownership extends beyond national institutions to include community-led and participatory processes where affected peoples shape design, decision-making, and monitoring. For example, consultation records, endorsement letters, and subnational partners could serve as evidence of this engagement. Drawing from 18 co-designed case studies, we see that there is evidence-based range of options as shown across 6 continents, including Fiji's Climate Relocation Fund, Vanuatu's Green Energy Fund, Ghana's African National Women Development Fund, and Brazilian Bolsa Familia program. We see these government and semi-public mechanisms can deliver justice and reach community, but only when combined with inclusive decision-making, devolved implementation, transparency in allocation, and meaningful engagement or civil society and local institutions. Second, on results and impacts, we urge a justice-based interpretation. Impact should be measured through repair, dignity, and equity, not scale or profit efficiency. Innovation must be redefined as strengthening local capacities, innovations in solidarity, governance, and collective care. These include community design, early warning systems, indigenous and frontline community-led approaches, and social protections that redistributes power. Grants remain the only just and appropriate instrument, consistent with B5 decisions and the polluter pays principle. Third, complementarity and coherence should not be misused to block funding by alleging duplication of efforts. The scale of need surpasses the funding available, reaching those efforts. Complementarity for this fund should focus on filling systemic gaps in access and equity. We also call for full transparency in the assessment methodology. A clear public assessment framework would allow participants to design stronger, more inclusive proposals and ensure fairness, giving everyone the best possible chance to access support. Regarding the environmental safeguards, we stress that environmental, social, gender, and human rights safeguards are not conditionalities, but enablers of justice, and ensuring its assessment must be reflected in the Secretariat capacity and expertise in indigenous rights, stressing the right for free, prior, and informed consent, gender, and community engagement. They should expand access and protection, reflecting the obligations affirmed by recent advisory opinions of the ICJ and the Inter-American Court. In closing, this fund was created as a mechanism of solidarity and reparation. The board must ensure that justice, participation, and local agency guide every criterion, assessment, and decision for the FRLD to truly deliver on its promise to repair harm and uphold dignity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Isidus, I will now hand over to Grace from Indigenous Peoples to speak about access modalities.
Thank you very much. Facilitating and enhancing access to the fund and starting to set the right parameters and expectations already at the BIM startup phase will determine if the FRLD can live up to its promise for bottom-up, country-led, and country-owned approaches. This was also at the heart of the co-chair's engagement with the World Bank as trustee to clarify access modalities. We want to raise our concern with the direction the fund is taking under the hosting arrangement with the World Bank, away from justice and community-oriented approaches towards a business-as-usual institution. This is a concern we have highlighted from the start. When the Transition Committee decided to opt for this interim arrangement, it was under the guise of urgency, claiming it would advance speed and efficiency. Today, we witness the opposite being true. Bureaucratic hurdles related to the World Bank hosting are creating unnecessary barriers and costs, and its unfit policies are dictating the way forward for a fund meant to be different. Access to the fund must involve effective and equitable delivery of funding to vulnerable and marginalized communities and groups from the get-go, and involve them, in particular women and indigenous peoples, effectively in designing and implementing these approaches already for funding requests under the BIM in line with the paragraph 43 of the governing instrument. Board members have rightly pointed out that the BIM should test all the various modalities to facilitate access to the fund's resources to provide lessons learned for the long-term operations. And they have articulated over and over that in implementing the mandates of the governing instrument, we cannot pick and choose randomly some elements over others. But the board is exactly doing this with respect to paragraph 49 of the governing instrument on access modalities, which is not considering in its entirety.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is John Leo Algo, representing the Youth Empowerment in Climate Action Platform, or YECAP, as well as the Philippines' leading CSO coordination network on climate action known as Action Klima Pilipinas, and representing Youngo, the Children Youth constituency, to the NFCCC for this second half of our intervention on access modalities. So picking up from what Manang Gray said, we are deeply concerned that in all of the discussions of the board on access during the BIM, paragraph 49, section D, on access to small grants that support communities, indigenous peoples, and vulnerable groups and their livelihoods seems to have been forgotten. We need a clear commitment by the board as it seeks to clarify access procedures for the BIM, that the provision of community grants and their active involvement must be guaranteed through direct budget support and both direct and international access entities, including with rapid disbursement efforts, while we continue to push for a fund-level mechanism, small grants as agreed in the governing instrument, for community access for the long-term operations of the FRLD. And also from our understanding, the board is planning to confirm here at B7 the list of accredited entities currently serving the GCF, the Adaptation Fund, and the GEF that can be implementing partners for countries for BIM resources. And there are a number of entities that have proven their ability to channel small grant funding to affected communities, and they should be prioritized, including in secretariat outreach for the BIM. In contrast, the same list contains many actors, such as international commercial banks and equity investment firms that, through their continued investment in fossil fuels, are still aggravating losses and damages that the fund seeks to address. And they are wholly unsuitable to be FRLD implementation partners. If the fund, as it always claims, wants to be different, it must include community access, such as through small grants, again in line with paragraph 49D of the governing instrument in the BIM. And this can be communicated in the operational handbook and guidelines to be developed by the FRLD Secretariat, and should be a consideration for funding request assessments as well as the results measurement for the BIM. And in line with our comments on the funding cycle previously, we also want to emphasize the key role of the FRLD in providing simplified direct access to funds in the immediate aftermath of a climate-related disaster. How can we make it as easy as possible for countries to access immediately needed funding in order to save lives and livelihoods, while ensuring the needs of the people and communities are met and their rights are respected? Rather than making it somehow fit into a traditional project cycle, this should be the focus of any conversation about direct budget support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John, I hand over to Liz, local government.
Thank you. Honorable co-chairs, distinguished members of the board, fellow delegates, I speak on behalf of the local governments and municipal authorities constituency of the UNFCCC as part of the United Cities and Local Governments Asia Pacific. Our political representative was scheduled to join this afternoon in the original schedule of this dialogue, and we would appreciate if he can still be given a chance to speak. Immediately after the 6th board meeting last July, Cebu City was placed under a state of calamity due to severe flooding brought by heavy monsoon rains and a tropical cyclone. Many more cities and provinces have suffered similar events in recent months. Through the years, the impact of climate-induced disasters has only intensified, often beyond scientific projections. And when disaster strikes, it is us, the local and regional governments, who are the first to respond, who our people rely on for rescue and relief. When every second matters, it is at the local level that our actions make the difference. As the closest level of government to our communities, we know best the lay of the land. This fund is a light of hope for us, especially when other climate finance mechanisms remain out of reach. Direct access for local and regional governments is crucial to change that reality. As this board prepares to operationalize the BIM and launch the first call for funding at COP30, allow me to emphasize 3 points. First, the fund's governing instrument, paragraph 45, calls for direct engagement at national and, where appropriate, subnational and local levels. This must be more than an aspiration. We urge the board to institutionalize a local and urban component as a positive criterion for project selection. Cities are where loss and damage converge, where infrastructure, livelihoods, and communities meet, and such markers should be included as a bare minimum criterion for the fund's startup phase. Second, we welcome the discussion on access entities, including subnational entities. This could be a historic step and remains a core priority for our members. Many local governments already have the capacity and accountability systems to manage funds responsibly. What we ask for is clear access, mandate, fast financing, trust, and voice to turn plans into action where it matters most. Third, while we recognize that the observer modalities are not under discussion at this meeting, the LGMA constituency critically values the opportunity to continue elevating the priorities and lived experience of cities and local governments as part of this board's periodical meetings, and we hope this participation can be formalized in the dedicated policy. In this respect, we appreciate the mention in option B of the draft policy as a positive step forward in the recognition of our constituency and hope this will be formalized in the final document. We would like to highlight that local and regional governments have distinct mandates in territorial governance and that we would appreciate a permanent way to engage with you. The fact that most of the site visits organized for this week exhibit a prominent local and urban component is particularly telling of this role that local and regional governments play in addressing climate-induced losses and damages, especially when you visit Makati City, where you will witness how leadership sustained across administrations can transform vision into preparedness. This is a living example of what happens when national and local governments work together, co-creating the policies and actions needed to respond to loss and damage. On behalf of all local and regional governments, the LGMA constituency, thank you for your attention and your partnership. Maraming salamat po. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, we have Maria Elena from Farmers.
Co-chairs, excellencies, magandang umaga, good morning. From the Farmers constituency, we welcome the language in the draft policy on observers' participation that affirms the principles of inclusivity, transparency, and representation of climate-vulnerable communities as central to effective stakeholders' participation. In light of these principles and building on our participation in board meetings as well as our letters to the board dated 2 September 2024 and 3 March 2025, we respectfully reiterate our call for the Farmers' constituency to be granted a permanent active observer seat under the finalized policy. This request is grounded on two considerations. One, farmers are among the most climate vulnerable sector and also frontline solution provider. Post-disaster assessment have shown that agricultural losses constitute around 1/4 of all documented disasters impact, with recent FAO estimates indicating 3.8 trillion in crop and livestock losses over the past 3 decades due to extreme events. These losses are not only severe but structural, undermining food security, rural livelihoods, and the resilience of entire economies, especially in developing countries. The draft policy rightly emphasized the need to ensure that the fund's work is informed by the perspective of those most impacted by climate-related loss and damage. In this context, farmers are not just participants, they are frontline stakeholders whose consistent involvement is essential to the fund's effectiveness and legitimacy. Second, farmers are one of the 9 official UNFCCC constituency. The Farmers' constituency is officially recognized under the UNFCCC stakeholder structure, alongside indigenous peoples, women and gender, children and youth, environmental NGOs, business and industry, among others. While we appreciate the inclusion of 2 rotating seats for climate-vulnerable communities, the allocation of permanent seat to only 5 constituencies raises concern regarding parity and consistency across observer representation. We respectfully question why farmers recognized under Agenda 21 and 2 and long active in global climate negotiations are not afforded the same permanent engagement opportunity as our peer constituency. This inconsistency risks undermining the participatory framework the fund is seeking to build. On a separate but related note, we respectfully suggest that the clarity and internal consistency of the policy should be further enhanced through more precise and consistent use of terminology, particularly the distinction between communities and constituency in Section 3 of the Annex. For example, paragraph 5 refers to specific observers group and observer constituency from among accredited organizations. Paragraph 7 refers to climate vulnerable communities and notes that the 2 rotating seats will ensure representation from constituencies most impacted by climate-related loss and damage, though some of the examples provided are not formal UNFCCC constituency. Paragraph 8 then introduces the phrase climate vulnerable community observer constituency, which appear to conflate distinct categories. We believe that clarifying this terminology would support a clearer understanding of the policy implications for representation and further reinforce the structured and transparent approach the board has sought to promote. We look forward to further engagement and stand ready to contribute to participatory process that reflects those most vulnerable to climate-related loss and damage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, board members. That's the end of our lineup of interventions. Happy to have the engagement now.
Okay, thank you very much, Tasneem and colleagues. So let me just, before I open it up to the board, I just want to note that there were a large number of interventions relating to a document that the board has not even engaged on, has not even seen. So Tasneem, maybe if you could ask your colleagues to share their interventions in writing related to the matters on the observer policy to the Secretariat, and that can be considered in that process, and so that we don't lose those remarks. But I fear that at this point the board doesn't have the sufficient background. We haven't even seen the paper, which is not something that we had expected to see anyway. So it's not as if there's anything going funny. It's just we don't have that because it's only coming up for B9. So in order to record those views, because it's going to be hard for the board to respond now, in the absence of that document that you're discussing, we just record the views and ask the Secretary to address them in the paper, and then when the paper comes to the board will be able to address that. So can we, board members, can I open the floor for your comments in relation to the specific interventions made by the observer colleagues in relation to the work of this board meeting? First, please. You're welcome to also ask other questions, but specifically, if you want to respond and have a dialogue with civil society colleagues on what they have proposed. I would say, Tasneem, that there actually is quite a lot in what you've said that would provide resonance with many, many board members, and you would have observed yesterday's informal consultation. So I think there are many issues where we are aligned, and I think I would just say to the Secretariat, you've also heard those, and there is definitely a challenge that we need to give to you in operationalizing the project cycle once it's approved on ensuring transparency, and I recall paragraph 45 of the governing instruments that talks about the need to engage countries in all aspects of the project cycle. So I think we would expect then, just when you operationalize the cycle, that you take high recognition of the issues about transparency and inclusiveness and openness of the process. So with that, I'm going to hand over. I see Mo has a flag up. Mo, followed by Gerard.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Tasneem, and whole representatives of the civil society for being with us today and also presenting their views and the engagement. It's always good to have you, and I also note with appreciation that there is an additional diversity in the presentation, the representatives from the civil society. I still want to see a way to find those climate-impacted communities coming in, especially those displaced communities because of climate change, including refugees and others. So I'm sure you will try to work around it, and I have very strong confidence that you will be able to make it happen. So this is the first point, and this is an appreciation point. The second point, just to highlight that in the report of the Secretariat, there are a couple of paragraphs where they mention engagement with the civil society. It is paragraph, I think, 15D and paragraph 22. So I would also ask you on your evaluation with this engagement that was referred to in the Secretariat's note, and this is important for us to understand how effective it was and how it is going forward. So this is my second point. My third point is, as Richard said, many of us, if not all of us around this table, fully endorse and support the points that you made. For me, very specifically, and this is for the point that relates to mobilization and replenishment of this fund, and take the 2 points or 3 points that were mentioned. One is that the replenishment should be based on information, and the information is already available in many reports, but part of it also will be the bottom-up information and the information that comes from the communities are captured in reports, be it UN reports or other reports coming from representative from the civil society, because it is what we really created this fund for. It is dealing with the lost development. It's not pushing for new development horizons, but it's really dealing with the lost development in many of all developing countries, and a lot of developing countries' communities. So how can we really deal with that and deliver on responding to this lost development and moving forward to bring the communities and the countries back to where they were before being impacted by climate? So one is, we'll also seek your inputs on that, which is what needs do you see from the community level, from otherwise and moving forward, and how can this really focus on delivering for the lost development component and deliver on the justice part? Which bring me to the last point, which is I think there will be sort of formula whereby you can also engage on the resource mobilization when we start engaging on it and moving forward on that. Inputs from your side will be very much appreciated. Observation and follow-up from your side for this process of resource mobilization for this fund would also be very much something that we will be working on to ensure that it moves forward for the in delivering something that's up to the expectation of the communities, the people, and the countries that have created this fund and have a lot of expectation from. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mo. I have Gerard, followed by Anna. Gerard.
Thanks, Richard, and thanks, Tasneem and colleagues. It's really helpful. I mean, overall, it reminds me of the importance of making sure that we get the observer policy right and agreed at B9 in a way that is evidence-based. So I just also support, Mo, your point about learning from engagement with the Secretariat so far and how we bring that in. And I think across this table, we have a desire to be innovative and constructive and learning throughout that. So I just want to really reinforce that point. And I'm sorry if the process, so it's difficult to look at you and speak to the mic at the same time, but I'm sorry if at times the process has felt unsatisfactory. It's worth saying, just as an aside, the UK, as a board member, regularly engages with UK civil society before each board meeting to try and gather perspectives, and we'd also encourage people to write in and give us their views as well. So please do continue to do that. I suppose Elena and I are going to be doing a bit of the co-facilitation on the funding cycle and the criteria, so maybe I'll speak to a couple of things on that if I can. So useful input, thank you very much indeed. We'll reflect on those. I wanted to, Lydia, re-emphasize the point you made on learning and innovation. That feels really important. We're going to have to try out new approaches. We're going to have to build an evidence base for that and what works in a range of contexts. And the BIM is really important in doing that. So I want to get a hold of that. Thank you. And in that, we need to think about what actually creates incentives to innovate. We're going to talk about a risk appetite and the risk management framework, and we need to think about how that's going to look as well. Lisa, thank you for the points, or Ramona, sorry, I wasn't quite sure which you prefer, but thank you for the points on funding criteria. Vulnerability is really important. It's really important this fund does reach those at the front line of the climate crisis and facing the greatest, who have the highest degree of vulnerability. Community-led and bottom-up, again, Mo mentioned that, is going to be really important. Thank you also for highlighting the impact and the results that others are achieving. You mentioned Bolsa Familia and others. I think that's really important, and we're going to set off talking about a results management framework here. Finding the evidence of the ways in which others are contributing to those elements of loss and damage outcomes is really important. And you mentioned social protection, full-scale community-led early warning systems. I think they are going to be important features, I hope, of some of the proposals that we see coming forward. So I think that's really good to see. And there was a discussion on scale. Scale is going to be really important. Moving to scale in impact is something that we should be thinking about. And that requires us to be simple and clear and standardized where we can possibly be. That point on Bolsa Familia, though, also links to this point on complementarity that a couple of folk made. I think that is really important. We had a discussion on complementarity and using it correctly yesterday. We do want to do that. But that, I think, takes us to the point that complementarity is about how the fund works alongside national policies and national schemes such as Bolsa Familia and adds significant value to those. And then lastly, I think we would all agree that safeguards are essential and enablers, and they're both, and working with them effectively is going to be really important. But thank you for the input.
Okay, thank you, Gerard. I have Anna, followed by Ali, and then Jan, and then Adar. So Anna, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks very much to the observers. Maybe just starting on the process, I think it's really important that we hear from all of you, ideally not from the kind of corner or the back of the room. Obviously, this is not the most useful format. I think it would be really useful to get input from the observers on individual, on the key documents. And I don't think we have made a kind of blanket decision that we wouldn't hear the observers on individual agenda items. So I would urge maybe the observers to request the possibility to speak, but of course in a coordinated manner so that we you know, don't hear really lengthy repetition. But I'd also urge the comments then to focus on the issues which can be decided by this board, because a lot of the comments maybe made go well beyond the kind of our mandate here. I very much also echo the questions made by and the comments made by Mo and Gerard on it will be useful to hear about your kind of experience with the Secretariat approach. I think it seems to be quite inclusive and innovative, and the kind of idea of setting up the monthly coordination seems to be a good initiative, and also we heard the idea of setting up a kind of an observer focal point, but it would be good to hear your input on that. On the funding criteria, thank you for reminding us that we should not be just talking about the country-led and country-owned approaches, but also really underlining the bottom-up approach, and that there's a need to take into to look at the kind of locally rooted access. And these references really shouldn't just remain rhetorical, and vulnerability needs to be reflected in the prioritization. That's something we clearly strongly agree with. Also, I found it very useful that you mentioned that ESS are not conditionalities, but enablers of justice, and they should be also reflected in the Secretariat capacity, including IP and gender, and fully agree with that. And the fact that you underline the no harm policy, this is really crucial. This is the essence of ESS and why we think it's important to ensure that we get that in place correctly. There were comments made by, we shouldn't pick and choose elements from the GI, and of course the access to small grants is really crucial. We want also community grants to be provided. Fully agree on this again, but I think there's a question of sequencing on what we can, so we ensure that we do things bit by bit, and you also know the constraints of the Secretariat at the moment, so just to ensure that we haven't forgotten the entirety of the GI. There was also, I think, a very interesting comment on the AEs, that AEs doing investment into fossil fuels, which make loss and damage worse. They are unsuitable for FRLD projects, and I fully agree. I think it's really important that we ensure policy coherence, and this is something that we have actually underlined very strongly in the GCF accreditation process, that all of the accredited entities should be Paris-aligned. And that's something that we definitely think should be considered by this board when we discuss the longer-term approach on accredited entities, and really looking that we work with entities which are Paris-aligned across their portfolios. Yeah, and finally, just to say, I strongly also echo the comments from Gerard on complementarity and coherence. Also making sure that we work kind of in synchronization and supporting the kind of domestic systems which are in place and not duplicating them. That's something where also the feedback from the CSOs will be very useful going forward. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Let me respond to an issue you raised, and I think an issue that Gerard raised. Yes, we have put in place the time frame and the mandate for the Secretariat to work on the observer policy. But in fact, what we're doing is we're developing policy as a matter of practice. So we have these meetings, co-chairs have been reaching out to civil society, the Secretariat is reaching out to civil society. There is engagement. That is also de facto a practice that we hope that our successors, when they take over, continue that practice and engagement. And again, this is a process of learning and doing better all the time. So we're not certainly saying that we've cracked the nut on this one. We've started a process, and we hope it to get better. Let me just confirm that it is at least these co-chairs' understandings that we, on each agenda item, if requested, during the general discussion, if civil society wishes to take the floor, we will grant them that. But the only differentiation we make is the difference between a general discussion versus a decision-making point, because a decision-making point is for the board members who have the authority and not for the active observers. So I will confirm. So the problem is that for this meeting, we decided not to open up the agenda items formally, but to have that discussion in the informal and then go to the working groups, which is why we tried to accommodate this dialogue before you went into your working group so you could hear from civil society. But let me very much confirm that the practice of the current co-chairs is to grant observers the agenda item should they request it at the right point. So thank you. I have Ali followed by Jan and Adar and Antoine. Please, Ali.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Tasneem, and your colleagues for excellent presentations and sharing very powerful ideas with us. And it's good to have your group at this timing. The timing is very right. We do need reminders, and these were very powerful reminders. And I don't want to give a summary, but I think many of us will agree on some of the points underlined, such as the science-based actions, particularly in resource mobilization strategy, locally led development, and some of the powerful points that made, particularly regarding the advisory of International Court of Justice. It's a very timely reminder. I was looking around the table, and I think all board members and alternates sitting in this room are members of ICJ. But ICJ has done exactly what it says. It's an advisory. But it's based on the principles that can be invoked and have been invoked by all ICJ member countries. The 3 points that you raised from ICJ's advisory are important ones for us to take note of. But what I wanted to request you to consider is that CSOs could possibly produce a technical paper or a working paper so that we understand fully what is in your mind collectively, if that's a consensus paper from your side. And I think it will be very useful for the work of this board. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ali. I have Jan, but let me just correct, it wasn't Antoine, it was Joanne, so sorry. But if you wish to speak, Antoine, I'll give you the floor after Joanne. So, Jan, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all the good interventions and a very good time also before we engage in the working group discussions where we try to agree on the key deliverables from this meeting. And of course, the observer policy is due for our discussion. We have, as we all know, we have many overlapping urgent tasks, but this is important to get the observer policy right. In the meantime, we are doing our best, I think, to walk the talk and to seek the opportunities for engaging beyond this formal session where we hear the views of the observers, but through the working group participation, we also will be happy to receive any written documentation, and also what you just, Richard, mentioned about interventions during individual sessions. So there's, I think that there's definitely openness to do as much as we can. I'm also happy to note that since the last meeting, our observer colleagues have received tables and microphones, so that's a very good improvement. And on our end, we are having also consultations in the intersessional period, and I think that welcoming that monthly exchanges with the co-chairs and the secretariat. So there is a range of options. Of course, we can do always
more and try to do more, but very important to keep the channel open. As you know, we are trying to duly fulfill the governing instrument and to ensure that we can use all the access modalities that are envisaged, which also includes the direct access through direct budget support, working with the implementing entities and also directly with the national authorities. So we'll try to design that package in this meeting. We are committed to delivering to communities and to vulnerable groups, and we are also collectively committed for scaling up of the fund's resources. I would also agree from this seat very much with the small communities and community grants access. We have judged that it will be too challenging to operationalize during the BIM phase, but it remains, from our perspective, a key priority. I would also echo the significance of the local governance and the local climate action, in particular when it comes to loss and damage. Human rights are definitely very dear to us. We appreciate the findings of the International Court of Justice that brings to the forefront the interdependence between enjoying the human rights and the protection of the climate system, and the obligation of states to take measures to protect the climate system and other parts of the environment. And of course, we need to find ways how we can best implement that advisory opinion. We are committed from this seat to the long-term health of our fund, noting that this is not the only work stream to address loss and damage. We need to find the best mix of complementarity, coordination, and coherence with the funding arrangements in order to reach the necessary scale for responding to loss and damage. And obviously filling the gaps from this perspective where our fund needs to come in. BIM is the testing mechanism for the fund, so we want to make sure that we can really test all the modalities, knowing that it is not a humanitarian response fund, and again here seeking the complementarities that we can offer from the operation of the fund. One comment on the work on documents and preparations. I think that everyone is making best efforts, but as we were approaching this meeting, we are on the same page in between the board members and the observers that we are reading on the go and trying to do best impacts from this meeting. But it is work in progress, and I think that we are improving. I think the outreach activity of the fund is also important part of the preparations. Two more comments, one on safeguards. Very much agree that these are not conditionalities but enablers. We find it important to look at the needs of the climate vulnerable communities and local access. In particular, that needs to be part of the assessment methodology. We want to give the agency to those which are affected to be able to shape the response policies in a bottom-up process, and we will be looking at it also when discussing the funding criteria. Last but not least, we recognize that women are key agents of change in their communities and decision makers and leaders in climate action, and they contribute with important knowledge and skills, and are committed to ensure. And we are committed to ensure adequate and effective representation in the actions of the fund, both on the front lines of climate change and also around this table. And having said that, also with the other important actors such as youth, indigenous peoples, and local communities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jan. So on my list, I have Adar, followed by Jean, and then Dan, and then I'm closing the list, and we'll let civil society respond to your remarks. So Ambassador Adar, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair, and thanks for the observer organizations. I think it has been a very good moment with us to be with you, at least to share your views on the decisions that the board needs to take at this 7th meeting of the board. Firstly, we would like to thank for the spacing out the uniqueness of this fund that should be different from others. And this will be reminding us to think through when we develop modalities for the implementation of the Barbados implementation modality itself, and also for the long run. And this uniqueness will also capture issues that you raised with regard to rapid response measures and taking a very short cycle to get the fund quickly, responding the needs of loss and damage faced by the most affected communities. We do support your views on this. And it is also very important to address economic and non-economic loss and damage. One of the critical sectors that you mentioned is also agriculture. That's also very, very important to be addressed. And in terms of ICG addressing issues in linking this to the discussion under this board, thank you very much for that views. And of course, there is some sort of linkage, but we do believe that this ICG is under the UN General Assembly, like Ali said, and of course we will see what will be happen under the UN General Assembly's discussion, going through committee, specific committee tasks to at least deal with this issue, and we will see the recommendation. But like Ian said before me, that we can also consider that, because that is also advisory opinion. So different related entities can also implement some critical issues out of that recommendation and opinion as well. But it will be also really good for us as board members to hear from you. How could we link decision under the UN General Assembly decision? That's a resolution linking this to the Paris Agreement, because this board or fund itself is under the Paris Agreement, also UNFCCC. So we will very much look forward to see or to hear your input on this issue, how to link two different entities to handle same thing with regard to addressing real loss and damage. And of course, we also would like to thank Lady for your comments that funding cycle being proposed is a very traditional one and doesn't include the possibility of rapid response issues. So this will be also reminding us to discuss this afternoon how best we can have some sort of key elements in place to facilitate us to go through that corridor, at least taking days, not months, to respond the rapid stream weather event issues. So rapid response to stream weather event issues. Of course, slow onset event will be quite different, but let us help us to go through, and we have already heard from your voice, and then we try our best to discuss among board members starting from this afternoon. So thank you very much for that. In terms of complementarity issues, not to be obstacle for getting support from the fund, I think that's also quite agreeable for most of board members, because we are here to serve developing countries who are vulnerable to the impact of climate change. And then we do see that the countries will not wait until the complementarity issues taking place. So it's some sort of just try to avoid the duplication issue, but it will be not considered as some sort of very tricky criteria to access to the fund. So, but that's also very good points for us, reminding us to look through this afternoon with regard to how to consider this criteria of complementarity and coherence issue. Last but not least, you also mentioned about direct budget support. I think that's also another uniqueness of this fund. And we as members, we will look through this again. Of course, it will be not happening this year, but at least it will be considered by somehow our next meeting, but we need to finalize the modalities how to get the direct budget support itself. I think that will be also quite critical for us, because our vulnerable countries, governments, they are waiting for us, especially developing countries, they are waiting for us when the direct budget support will be taking place. So once again, thank you very much for that voice. I think those are quite useful for the members to at least be used as reference when we develop further modalities for the operationalization of the BIM and also for long run. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Adao. I have two more speakers, and then I want to hand over to civil society to respond. We have 13 minutes left, so please be brief. Jean, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Since this is the first time I'm taking the floor in this board meeting of this fund, please allow me to briefly introduce myself. My name is João França, and I'm replacing Ambassador Leia Mechagas as a board member from Brazil in this seat, which is currently comprised by Argentina, Ecuador, and Uruguay as well. I also would like to express my gratitude to the government and the people of the Philippines for their warm hospitality, and to extend our heartfelt condolences for the human losses caused by the earthquake and the super typhoons that have recently hit the archipelago. Our deepest sympathies for the affected families, and we wish a quick recovery for the country. Once having said this, I would like to thank all those who spoke on behalf of civil society for their valuable contributions, including for recalling us the core principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. And to my fellow board members, I'd like to invite all of us to take into account in this P7 the sense of climate urgency underscored in the interventions we just listened to. I hope this will inform us to work together as a board, guided by a sense of urgency, result orientation, climate justice, and solidarity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean. So last is Melissa's Dan. Please go ahead, Dan.
Thank you very much to the representatives of civil society and for providing those very clear statements on expectations and views in respect to what we are looking at here at B7. I continue to see that civil society engagement has been important for the way that this board has worked and discussed issues over this time, so I fully support the urging that we do continue to receive on improving these arrangements as much as possible. Similar to the remarks by Gerard about there being, other engagement with civil societies, just also to kind of reiterate that this seat and the team behind it continues to engage closely with our own civil society within the region. In our recent second loss and damage dialogue, it involved the first Pacific Youth Dialogue on loss and damage, and their statements and outcomes continue to be very much part of a driving force in the way that we look at the issues and the way that we advocate for our priorities within the context of the board. I very much appreciated the statements on local and national governments and the burden that they face and the importance of understanding that within what we were designing here. They do have governments, national actors, they have the ethical and in many cases legal burden, responsibility of dealing with these impacts and dealing with the implications. And thankfully, we are working within the context of a fund that is mandated by all parties to provide direct access in the context of issues that can only be sensitively and adequately dealt with at the local level. And this is a shared understanding within the board. We do have to also, continue to grapple with the challenges of operationalization and the financial architecture that we work within. I think there was the GCF references to flying the plane earlier. I think, in the context of the fund, what we need to be careful of is not, so much building the plane while flying it, but maybe the risk of dismantling it while flying it, simplifying it, changing it, taking out things that we know need to be installed. So we do hope that despite those challenges with procedures, practices, institutional arrangements, and power dynamics, that we can ensure that we can work against the situation where we often see that finance lands everywhere but on the ground, and that's what this fund is about. It's about aiming for targets that can receive the funding, and we have to make those pathways as direct as possible to fulfill our mandate. Of course, I think it's important in the context of this meeting to recognize the International Court of Justice's advisory opinion. This is, of course, very important to this seat as it was derived from initial work of students, 27 students from the Pacific, and something that's been closely advocated by the region, led by Vanuatu, and it is ultimately simply an overview of what we have agreed as parties and what has to happen within the regime that we've set up to deal with the climate crisis. And many of its concepts, however uncomfortable, they are essentially the reality and part of the broader overview of international cooperation that is now part of the consciousness of how we work on these issues. But what is also clear from the advisory opinion is a recognition of this fund specifically as an important role as a source of solidarity, and it is the means to facilitate multilateral solutions and very different to some of the things that the ICJ opinion discusses. And I think that's really important for us to ensure that that articulation of that role is something that we maintain. It is about solidarity. It's about a reiteration of our own agreements as parties, and it is apparent that it's the type of solidarity that really is only going to be useful if we consider it in the context of resource mobilization and the scale and purpose of what this fund needs to do. So very much thank the civil society representatives for prompting this discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dan. You were my last on the list, Jibril. I'm going to open the list again. 2 minutes, please, so we can allow some time for the colleagues to respond. So, Jibril, please.
Thank you very much, Richard. I will be brief. Firstly, I want to thank really our colleagues from civil society. The presence in this room is very important for us because they bring us some lights in how we can advance in our work and to really defend our population underground. This is very important. It's why I appreciate very much one of the statements, how we can effectively mobilize resources in order to have this kind of rapid disbursement when we have some extreme events, when we will be in the situation to have a quick response to the population which have been hit by the extreme event. This is very important. We need really too much money, if I can say like this, in order to fulfill our commitments here as board members. Your role is very important because I know you are very close to the population, you work underground, and you know really how our population suffers. So it's very important for me to hear from you how we can mobilize resources, how we can access really quickly these resources in order to be very effective. My colleague Adao always says this fund must be different from others. Yes, this is very important. This is very important. We don't need to have some kind of bureaucratic fund where the situation will be there, being unable to bring concrete solution in order to satisfy the problem that our population are facing. This is very important. So thank you very much. And I think we will continue to push in this process in order to have some kind of a balanced solution which will satisfy everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jibril. So thank you, board members, for those responses and responding to civil society. Taslim, can I turn over to you if they want to respond? We do have some time constraints, so can we please be brief? But the floor is yours, Taslim.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all board members for their engagement, and also we'll consider the feedback and engagement from board members as reflections rather than us responding to questions. We'll wrap up very quickly with a response from Hajid to specific questions, not all of them necessarily, and then we'll close because we have an urgent appointment with downstairs.
Thank you very much, board members and Tasneem. So I'm going to just pick up three areas to respond. And as Tasneem said, not all the questions, but we are definitely taking note of all of them. Mo, thank you very much for talking about the space for communities. We always strive for that. Again, to acknowledge even we struggle in this space. So we need to make this space more conducive for communities to be more involved. And that requires a number of steps. And we have been talking to the Secretariat to make that happen. On the issue of migrant communities, just to say, as we have been informing, we are working very closely with organizations like ActionAid and Climate Migration and Displacement Platform, and you will hear from us early 2026. We'll be organizing a series of sessions. And on community-based organizations, again, thank you for highlighting. I think it's important to make sure that the leadership comes from the community. As Santiago Network is developing its plans, we would also expect that Santiago Network also catalyzes that by working with more local and national organizations than the international ones to make sure that what is coming from the ground is rooted in terms of assessments and planning. Second point on funding cycle, and thank you Gerard and others and Rao and Jibril for highlighting. Well, we must recognize that 3 years have passed since COP27. 3 years. Let's close our eyes for a moment and reflect, what are we actually doing? We must reflect on it. We are reinventing the wheel in so many ways. Countries need to go through now the hoops and loops of procedures once again, causing deliberate and unnecessary delays. In countries that are here, Nepal, Pakistan, Malawi, Senegal, Colombia, Honduras, Vanuatu, Fiji, they are facing this reality and they have been responding to disasters. It's not new for them. This process is imagining as if it's the first time they're facing disasters. Let's be very fundamental about it. Let's try and create systems. They are doing it for decades. They have a funding gap. Let's respond to that funding gap by enabling direct access, by engaging communities. So I think there's a big question mark on what we are doing and our approach, and there's some fundamental problem here. And totally agree with Adao and several others. We need a light touch, short cycle process to now enable money to reach communities. They know it. They know how to do it. And my third point and final one is about complementarity. I think we need to unpack what exactly it is. First of all, the primary source has to be budgetary contributions from developed countries. We can't get away from it. We need to continue to acknowledge that, yes, there are innovative sources where we would expect particularly developed countries to engage in the international process to get money from those mechanisms, whether it is air passenger levy or we are talking about fossil fuel levy. But what is stopping developed countries to tax the fossil fuel industry in their own countries? What about diverting the money that's going to the military establishment? How can we redirect that money to communities and countries who are facing the climate crisis? So let us acknowledge there is money. There's a lot of money, but it's going in the wrong direction. And we must fill the fund now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harjeed. And so again, thank you to all board members. We hope that this engagement also gets reflected in the conversations that will happen in small groups. Maybe there'll be some flexibility for us to intervene in those small groups. We will try our best to get that. So board members, clearly we have a huge responsibility on our hands. The fund needs funds, and we need to get those funds to the ground where it's needed the most. That is the key mandate for this fund. And we are here to support this fund. In fact, the biggest champions for this fund is civil society. The very people sitting in this room have fought for this fund to be established. We are the biggest champions. We are the ones going out there fighting to get this fund filled. And we're not consultancies. We are civil society. We don't get paid to do this job. We are the best communicators for this fund. So let me also say that our experience with the Secretariat has been, if we can call it that, a good relationship, but one that is of continuous learning and continuous improvement. We need to, of course, improve the way that observers participate in this meeting and its role in the fund. Our engagements with the Secretariat have been, we have a time set for consultation, we get an agenda very, close to the time of the meeting. We certainly don't see documents in advance, and I believe this is a problem between the co-chairs and the Secretariat about documents being provided to observers in advance. It does talk to transparency issues and our ability to prepare for these meetings that we take very seriously. So certainly that has been a challenge. And then these consultations, I think, could be improved because right now it seems to be a tick box exercise. We have met with civil society, we've had this conversation. We're not sure to what extent our contributions are actually meaningful in terms of its impact on the work of the board eventually. So we'd like to improve the process, which we will, of course, do together with the Secretariat. And in addition to that, we are going to be working with the Secretariat in a co-convening process to come up with the proposed active observer policy as agreed to in B6. So certainly this is our opportunity to make sure that that active observer process deals with much more meaningful engagement and participation by civil society, but also addresses the issues that Ambassador Mo raises consistently in this meeting. Who else and who else's voice needs to be represented and visible in these processes? So thank you very much. Again, we look forward to seeing many of you join the protest to fill the fund downstairs in the front of the hotel, Liddy. In the front of the hotel, the best way to communicate for this fund is to come and join the protest now.
And they can watch also from the dining room.
Oh, but you can also watch from the dining room. But we'd prefer you to join the protest and then eat in the dining room. Thank you very much to all of the board members, co-chairs for the CSO dialogue. We really appreciate that, and we look forward to continuous improvement. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Tasneem. So we all agree this is important, and we all agree to continue working on these matters. So continue to keep us on our toes on this one. So with that, colleagues, that's the end of this agenda item. Let me tell you, the rooms for the small groups, which will start at 2 o'clock, and you can have those rooms until however late you want. As I said yesterday, we would not encourage you to go all night unless you want to do that, but and that's more of a health issue than a fatigue issue than however long you wish. So the room for the small group that will be dealing with 10B, the access and direct budget support, will be room Taft, Ballroom 1, right? I think there'll be signs outside. The small group are dealing with the agenda item 7 on the funding criteria and cycle, will be Taft, Ballroom 2, which is also the developed country room. And then the group on resource mobilization will be in a room called the boardroom, which is not this room, but it's called the boardroom, and I understand it's. If you exit this door and then turn right, so pretty close to where the co-chair's office is. That's where the board. No. Oh, okay. No, we're all wrong. The boardroom is this room. So okay. So it's clear. So enjoy your lunch, colleagues. And we'll see you in your rooms at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much.